All right. If all is good, we should be live. Hey, Daniel.
Woot woot. How's it going, man?
Good. Hi, everyone. Back for more. I wanted to say that. That remembers me of one of the first games that I played on a PC, which was Seventh Guest. One of the first games on CD. It was on a 486 at the time. Can you imagine? A CD-ROM
You're,
player, 486 with nice graphics. And
you're
every
dating
time
yourself there.
Yeah, every time you went out of a save and you came back, then the voice always said back for more. It was like a horror game. Quite funny. It shows how old I am.
Yeah, I was
If
gonna
you,
say definitely showing your age there with the game.
yeah, if I look up Seven Guests, when did that come out? Here, Wikipedia. In April of '93. Yeah, I was in university at that time. Yep.
I'm not gonna admit where I was at that time.
That.
I was in prison.
For the third time. Yeah.
More like timeout.
All right. So let's get down to it. We have a lot to discuss again. Our usual disclaimer. We have a big and broad agenda that this time we cut up in chapters, so make it easier for people to jump around. And also for us to actually bring together several topics under one and the same area, not be so confusing anymore. We are getting our stuff together. It's only episode 27, Daniel, so good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. You don't break your stride until you get into 30, right?
Exactly. So we're gonna
It'll
talk
be a fun
about
one.
yeah, we're gonna talk about several hacktivist campaigns. Australia. Yeah, I've actually I was there while the everything happened, so I got to feel it and see it live. Government
It's kind of
alert.
fun when you're in the danger zone, right?
Yeah, you can feel the stress on the people, and people only talk about this, so they only have eyes and ears for this. That is for sure. But hi to my friends down under if they're watching. I know some of them will be, because I dropped the link enough while I was there. So we're gonna talk about government alerts, extortion campaigns, midterm elections update. Well, yeah, not update. They're finished, right? They were a
Yep.
success.
Well, I mean, we're rolling into the main elections now, but yeah,
Yeah, we're
I,
preparing.
I, I, I guess they were a success. Yeah.
Yeah, and something that's going on right now, and even I believe Belgium is playing right now, which I said to Daniel that he had to turn off because I'm recording it. I don't want to know if they score or not.
So if you're listening and you want to troll Pascal, make sure you put updates
Yeah,
into the chat.
yeah.
Scores, penalties, all that fun stuff. Pitch invaders with rainbow flags, whatever you want.
Vulnerabilities, internet noise, credential access, and raids and arrests. So that's gonna be it for today. A lot to go through. If you want to get in touch with us through Twitter, Radware Research, you can find us there, or through Telegram. Easier way through the Radware Research chat. Um, if you're lucky, you will get a
Ooh, and
response.
Mastodon now.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, must, yeah, okay. What's the symbol
Hmm.
for a mastodon?
An elephant.
Okay. Well, yeah, so a little birdie and an elephant. Yeah, it goes well together.
Yep,
So I will
definitely.
update. Yeah, I will update that for the next episode. Um, and also, yeah, the newsletter that comes out every month with the summary of everything that we're talking here. What are the highlights of the month? So without further ado, we're gonna jump into hacktivist campaigns, or how many months in a row? 10th month in a row, I guess, that we're talking about
Yeah.
the war.
It's been a wild ride for that's for sure. One of the things that we wanted to show right here is specifically about how tactics, techniques, and procedures are shifting over those last few months there. So what we want to talk about first is the IT Army's defacement campaign. A lot of you are probably familiar from our coverage in the past that IT Army is what would we want to call it, a Ukrainian nation state hacktivist group that is mainly known for launching DDoS attacks, but they've also been seen doing hack and leak campaigns, specifically with the Ukrainian special forces, and now they've moved over into defacements. So the Day of Dignity and Freedom is an annual holiday that's celebrated on November 21st in Ukraine. This was just more of a recent holiday they established in 2014. It marks two significant events that happened. People are probably familiar with the Orange Revolution and the Revolution of Dignity in 2013, 2014. So they have this holiday that they celebrate every year. The fun part about this holiday this year is that the IT Army decided to launch a defacement campaign to celebrate. So they targeted government websites in these four regions below. I'm not going to try and pronounce them this time. But it was kind of interesting to see them start picking up as far as doing defacement campaigns. Very notable as far as seeing the shift in TTPs, and it's something that we've talked about in earlier slide decks as well. That DDoS kind of has a success rate only for so long, right? So
Hmm.
there's only so long that you can launch these little DDoS attacks against these organizations, and you have the same old impact over and over again. And then you're going to start looking for new ways to create impact. So now they're getting more into the spreading of propaganda and trolling of Russians by defacing their websites.
Yeah, we saw them do that with the security cams before, right? Playing the national
Yeah, yeah.
anthem on the security cams in Russia and looking at the
Nope.
images, how the Russian people were, what's happening?
Yeah, there's been a lot of those too, of like people stealing cameras and putting them in their actual homes without changing passwords either. A lot of I Spy activity going on over there. But it wasn't just the holiday either that they did. President Putin attended a artificial intelligence journey, AIJ conference in Moscow to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. So just a little background for our viewers. Russia has taken AI and machine learning very seriously. They're trying to be the leader in the world with it. They're
Sounds
holding all
like
kinds of
China.
conferences. Yeah, they're having a hard bind. I think like their main contributor slash sponsor behind this is one of their national banks.
Hmm.
Um, but anyways, Putin went to this conference just a few days ago. He wanted to discuss artificial intelligence, and because of this, the IT Army ended up launching a defacement campaign against the AI website, so ai.gov.ru, as a form of protest against Putin's attendance. So once again, the IT Army using defacements now over DDoS as a way to spread their propaganda. So like with the DDoS attack, you only take it offline. Someone's got to go find your account, find your posts about why you ran the operation and why you took them offline. Where defacement's very direct. Someone goes to the website and they immediately see why they've been defaced, the message that the attackers or threat actors or whatever you want to call them have posted up.
Yeah.
Definitely not legal, but I guess sanctioned in a way. So I don't know if it's is defacement a crime too? Is that what we're gonna do for 2023?
Not if you're at war. And you do it
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
country that's in the war. All is fair. Well, yeah, not all, as we saw, according to some recent developments where Russia was deemed a terrorist state. So not all is fair in love and war, but yeah, there's some more leeway. Of course, if you do it from the U.S., that might be another question.
You just don't commit crime. It's usually the best way to go about it. And if you do, be
Yeah,
smart about it.
yeah,
But don't be manipulated by some of these nation state hacktivist groups that try to tell you that they are legitimate or they're legal,
yeah.
because you might end up in trouble. I'm not saying that the Russians are going to come over here to the United States and arrest you, but internet service providers and other people in transit might get a little upset.
Co
So
Coming back to the AI part, I remember articles being written, whoever controls AI will control the world. So it's a very important topic at this moment, even though that we see limited advancement. If you look at, well, limited. Not everybody will agree with me, but most people, if you look at AI, it has been. I even had it in university. I remember I was in university in '93 when I was playing the Seven Guests. So I already had some lectures on artificial intelligence, machine learning, how it works, neural networks, all that kind of thing. And then there was like a AI cold period, ice age, where nothing happened, and then it came up again now because yeah, now we have the data, now we have the cloud computing, so we have the compute, we have big amounts of data. The problem, however, is that data is not always that clean, as they say in in data processing, garbage in, garbage out. If data is biased, the decisions that is made by AI will be biased. And again, recently, who was it? Was it Microsoft that put out yet another chatbot out there, said that now it's gonna work well, but they had to take it down again after 24 hours. It's not the first
Yeah,
time.
poisoning AI is definitely a
Yeah,
thing out there. Yeah, I don't trust it at the moment. There's too many people out there that can influence its behavior.
yeah,
I'm not a big supporter of it. There are other people out there that are, but I
yeah.
definitely see the risks.
Even the self-driving cars, they still did not make any decision or a lot of advancements since the first cars came out. It's not like everybody's sitting in a car and they're driving autonomously. So
I kind of welcome the self-driving cars, though. People don't know how to drive, and I think that it would be much more regulated and safer if it,
well, yeah,
except for the hack. Yeah,
to my point, if people learn the AI how to drive, how do you think the AI will drive?
yeah.
Yeah.
Good old Elon Musk and all of our Teslas there.
Maybe we should
But
maybe we should get some data from F1 and put that in the AI for the cars. Maybe that would be
there's
better.
there's part of me that actually wants to get one of these electric cars and start playing with it just to
Yeah,
see what you can do. But then
yeah,
again, what, $70,000 to brick out a vehicle? It'd be a
mhm,
really upsetting day. So in other hacktivist news here, Hacksnet begins training attackers. So as we had mentioned in previous slides about Hacksnet, Hacksnet is attributed to be they're working in coordination with the Russian GRU, and this was attributed by Mandiant. They're basically saying that this group is working in step with the Russian GRU in collaboration with GRU operations. So they're not saying they're directly working with them, but the operations are in parallel as far as like they're going to do a hack and leak, and then Hacksnet's going to do a DDoS attack as a smokescreen. But they're looking for new attackers now. And this is kind of interesting that it is attributed to be a state-sponsored group that is now looking to train people how to DDoS attack for the Russians. So basically, they're looking for two skill sets. They're looking for people that don't know how to DDoS attack and people that know how to DDoS attack. The people that know how to launch a DDoS attack are going to be put right into the field immediately to start launching attacks. But some of the interesting things as far as like registering, I've thought about like taking this class just to say I've been trained by the Russian GRU
yeah,
and DDoS, but they want you to talk about like, where you live, why you wanted to join the group, how old you are, and how you feel about the special operation in Ukraine. A little bit of an intelligence operation, in my opinion. I think they're going to be
yeah.
gathering quite a bit of information
Mhm.
from uh, overstimulated teenagers looking to launch attacks. I think is the best way to describe that. But
Yeah, but most of them will
yeah,
be Russian, so
Eh, that last time we covered that guy from Reevil that was from Poland. So
yeah, well, yeah, yeah, but
uh,
yeah,
their
that
reach is getting pretty far, which is something to note, right?
yeah, yeah, that's true. There are some people out there in the West that might support it, but I think that most of the submissions will come from Russia. To start with, I cannot read what they write, so
Yeah, it's hard, as far as like Russian slang and everything like that. It's very
follow.
difficult for a Westerner, specifically an English-speaking Westerner, to join. Uh, yeah, I need a Russian translator for this, but might join the group just to see what they have to offer.
Yeah,
Death by a thousand needle download, LOIC, the usual.
yeah. How to use AWS free tier. Yeah, yeah. Well, we already seen the tutorials for that one.
Skid 101 is basically
Yeah,
what they're doing right there.
yeah.
But outside of
Oh,
Hacksnet, we also have Killnet. So Killnet is once again launching DDoS attacks against airports in the United States. They had previously launched attacks in March, which got them onto a CISA FBI advisory about launching attacks against critical infrastructure. And then in October, we alerted on this and covered it quite a bit about the DDoS attacks that Killnet was launching against U.S. airports at that time. Uh, these are informational websites, so there's actually no impact to like air traffic or any kind of situation like that. But this is kind of their technique, and procedures to look for public-facing websites that they can take down to show that they've undermined the public confidence in the system, right? So they're trying to undermine the authority. They're trying to get the public scared to think that maybe the air flights might be impacted, but we haven't seen that after 3 rounds of attacks. This is mainly attention seeking, and that's because the admin or operator or whatever you want to call him behind KillNet Kill Milk is very much an attention seeking person. So they enjoy launching attacks and attempt to get as much media attention as they can. And this has kind of been an issue as far as in the West is, do we cover it? Do we not cover it? So they launch these legitimate attacks. The websites actually go down, and then we all have to sit around saying, well, do we want to talk about this or do we not want to talk about this? Because when we talk about it, we give them credit,
Mhm.
we give them a platform, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I don't think that we should be ignoring these attacks or these impacts here. They're lessons that we can learn from, so we shouldn't just push them away to the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we should not lose eye from the actor itself because they might change tactic at some point. And to your point, that's why we refer to them as hacktivists because the tactic of a hacktivist is to prove a point and to get media attention or the attention of the public. How do you get that? Well, by impacting public-facing website. You're not impacting the air traffic control, but yeah, you're just impacting enough. It's an easy target because most of those websites are not even protected. I would claim or hope at least that control platforms and the air control systems are protected. But the public website, well, I think from a risk perspective, you can probably live with some outage of a couple of minutes. It's not that important compared to the other systems that are linked to it. However, it has an impact on the reputation, so that's something that people need to take into account. If your airport website is down, your reputation might be hurt by that.
And that, you know, that comes from like honest lessons and everything. And
Mhm.
start educating the public that yeah, DDoS attacks are impactful, but it depends on what they impact, right?
Yep.
So if you're impacting public facing websites, then no, there's really no chance to undermine public confidence in the system. But if you actually impact air traffic control, that's a whole different situation. But
Yep.
the impact for air traffic, we really only see that with swatting attacks, where people call in fake bomb threats or fake incidences on airplanes that require them to land, and that impacts air traffic. But as far as these DDoS attacks, they're just preventing people from finding information that they probably already have on their phone to begin with.
Or they pivot to ransomware.
We'll cover that in a little bit, won't we? So the last thing in the hacktivist section here we want to talk about is EU Parliament got knocked offline. I'm sure a lot of you saw this. Anonymous Russia associated with Killnet launched a DDoS attack against European Parliament. This was very well covered by the media. This is what we're saying is like, do you want to cover it? Do you not want to cover it? This was well covered. So
Yeah.
they got a lot of attention. They enjoyed this, but it's not outside of, it's nothing new, right? So the group has been targeting election websites and government websites in the United States for the last few months. And they went over and they started targeting the European Parliament, which was recognizing Russia as a state sponsored terrorism at the moment. Is that correct,
Yeah,
Pascal?
yeah, exactly. So they voted for this and they declared that Russia was considered a state sponsor for terrorism. So they want to put in further um, bans on Russia and on the Russian people. That's why Killnet was so angry, and that's why they went after the website. And
It
yeah,
seems like
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems like Killnet's one of the more active groups coming out of Russia. I mean,
Oh yeah,
every
yeah.
month we have multiple events we have to cover. Hacksnet kind of keeps themselves. Anonymous Russia seems to be falling in line with
Hmm.
Killnet, and then there's also all the other Killnet groups, Radius and whatnot, that are underneath
Yep.
the main umbrella of the organization, which
Well, yeah, you have
is pretty
no name,
interesting.
no name that have a continuous activity, but mostly targeting Latvia, Poland, and Ukraine targets that we are aware of. But Killnet, yeah, Killnet follows the media. Whenever there is something that impacts Russia, a statement or a decision, or somebody supports Ukraine, you will see Killnet a couple of hours later coming with a campaign and attacking governments, sometimes social media, sometimes other platforms in that country as a retaliation for their support in Ukraine or for what they said about Russia. And the crazy, well, the crazy, if you know the context, not that crazy, but when you read the message from Anonymous Russia, and that was the message that was originally on the Killnet's channel, I believe, right? That was reshared.
Yep.
Um, they say about the European Parliament as sponsors of homosexuality, and the reason behind that, I believe, is that at the same day the Russian Parliament voted a new law that people, I believe it's people above 12 years old, cannot refer to homosexuality again or anymore. Before that, that law was for people under 12 years old. You know that in Russia homosexuality is not accepted.
Right.
So there is now there was already a law for kids under 12 not to refer to homosexuality in any way or form, even in just public speaking. But now it also was ruled for people above 12 years old. I believe that that was the actual rule that was put in place, and that's probably why they refer to homosexuality in this alert. It just happened to be the same day. Nothing to do with the fact that the European Parliament called them state sponsor of terrorism.
It's crazy. Russia's really kind of pushing themselves into a corner with all these hacktivist activities and
Yeah,
crazy laws that they're passing and activities that they're doing. It's just,
yeah.
I just don't see a way out for Russia at this point. They're really regressing
Author
here.
yeah, if you talk about authoritarian states, I think they're slipping very low on that slope now.
North Korea would be really proud.
Come
So
here,
moving into the next
come here,
section
my
here.
brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kim has a new brother. Australia under attack. Yeah.
Yeah. So the new section here, Australia under attack. As Pascal mentioned, he was down in Australia for the last month, doing lots of really cool work. But while he was down there, there were several
Yeah.
attacks launched, weren't there?
Yeah, well, yeah, they actually happened before I was there, but yeah, one
Okay.
of the biggest ones. So there were two big ones that came out. So one is Opus that was attacked, and Opus is the second largest mobile provider in Australia. So, and that came with leak of data, but the most important one and the most impacting one and the one with most drama by far was the Medibank attack. And Medibank is medical insurance, if I'm not mistaken, and they have records on people keeping why they had medical insurance, what kind of things they claimed for insurance. So they have very sensitive information, and apparently there was a ransomware attack that exfiltrated the data. And yeah, it was our Revil because we have a slide after that that links to the our Revil leak website. Personal data of 9.7 million Australian citizens was actually stolen, and and in the beginning, so they were asking for a ransom demand of 10 million. Um, but Medibank refused to pay, so they cut it down. They said, okay, so we're gonna ask for $1 per affected customer, so basically 9.7 million, which was like, yeah, okay, it's 300,000 less, not that much. But Medibank stayed hard and said, no, we are not gonna pay money to extortionists. So at that point, Arriva already know where this was going. So they started to leak some information, and the first leak they did were the records and the names of people who had abortions, and also a file containing the names of people who had alcohol-related illnesses. So very sensitive information. But Medibank still refused to pay. So now the latest evolution that was yesterday, I believe, that we saw that message that the whole file was being
Yeah.
leaked now. So this hack really rocked Australia. There were some really emotional scenes in the parliament discussing what it causes to Australians. And yeah, you can imagine abortions being out there. Those are all the things that people don't want to be known suddenly come into public, not only to a limited number of eyes, but to all the eyes in the world can see what who did what and why. So this is really bad what happened there.
Yeah, this is a very epic hack here, man. I mean,
Yeah,
having all kinds of personal information related to medical issues leaked all over the internet, like you said yesterday,
yeah,
posted. all the information. They're done negotiating. It's over at this point.
So yeah, so in the weeks I was there, pretty much all questions went to what happened to Medibank. How do they do that? How does that work? So there was a lot of questions around that and a lot of talk about Medibank and what's going on there.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, the threat actors behind this were ReEvil slash Blog XX. This is kind of an interesting subject here. Is that ReEvil, as we all know, was targeted. There's been several people arrested. In fact, the 22-year-old kid behind Castilla VSA is being extradited to the United States currently for his hack that he did. And all this infrastructure disappeared. That was ReEvil. But the ReEvil infrastructure, as far as the onion address and the infrastructure related to that website, did come back up, but it came back up underneath blog XX, which left a lot of
Yeah,
people in the community
it
trying to
was
figure out.
redirected, I believe. So the our evil infrastructure was there, and if you went to the onion link of our evil, you got redirected to a new onion website, which was blogxx.
Yeah, and at some point in time, it was actually on the same onion as well. But with this being said, ReEvil is a very young group. I mean, yeah, there are likely Russian operators running it, but as we've seen, many of the affiliates are children in other countries like Poland and neighboring countries. And just kind of an interesting, I guess, dark humor side of things that someone had posted up this meme on Twitter, and the hackers behind this campaign took the meme and actually posted it up onto their blog as well, which I thought it was interesting. Do you pay? No, I do not. But yeah, it's kind of sad now, a
Yeah.
day later after all the information has been posted because they didn't pay, and it gets into the conversation: should people pay or should they not pay? And I think that it's not exactly just black or white. There's a lot of gray in between,
Yeah,
depending on what
I had
data
a
is
lot
going to be
of
leaked
questions
to.
about that from people. Do you think that they made the right decision not to pay? In some ways, yes, because once you pay, you create a precedent, and then you know that yeah, you're gonna have to pay forever because they're gonna keep coming after your crown jewels and your most sensitive data because they know that you're a country that pays. If you don't pay, well, yeah, data gets leaked. Well, and even if you pay, you cannot never be certain that all copies are destroyed and that the data will not make its way anyway, sooner or later on the dark web. So there's no guarantee that that data will never be leaked.
And
So
as Pascal mentioned, blood's in the water type of thing, and that's what we were seeing. There were several ransomware groups that were targeting Australia. Ransom House targeted SMB Solution, Ragnar Locker targeted IT on cloud. There's even a conversation on XSS by threat actors asking if Australia had been over targeted, which brings up an interesting point as far as like how many organizations at once can ransomware groups target in a specific country before they shake up a beehive,
yeah, well,
because a
yeah,
lot of people aren't going to take these cyber attacks sitting down, and they're going to want to have some kind of reaction to the action, right? And I think that's kind of like what's building out of Australia right now.
yeah,
That's getting some
yeah.
buy-in from a lot of people in the community, at least.
Yeah, well, I had this question asked to me from people, and the general feedback was that Australia didn't suffer that many ransomware attacks until lately. And what I think happened is that the actors, mostly Russian-speaking actors that we see big impacts from in the Western world, like Europe and the US, they are closer to Europe and US and they know much better the organizations and how it works in the Europe and US. So they can find their targets and choose their targets better in Europe and US. Australia was always like that island far away from them. But they learned to trade in Europe by hacking Europe and by hacking US. So you
And
saw
just to
that the attacks were more basic and less hard hitting than the latest ones that became heavier and bigger. So they learned their trade here, and then I believe that they moved their eyesight to Australia, and yeah, one of the first big targets that you would go after. Because for me, Optus and Medibank, I never heard of those before. Now I know what Optus and Medibank is because they were in the news. So probably the same for the attackers. It's like, okay, they did their research in here in Australia, and then you see that activity ramping fast because they they already have their tactics in place. They have their infrastructure in place. They know how to deal with it. They already had experience built up in Europe and the US. So now they come as real seasoned hackers back to Australia. And I think that's why Australia now sees this big number of attacks. And yeah, once this gets in the news, well, it's like, okay, there's a whole fresh new territory and companies out there that we can explore. Let's go over there and let's see what we can take there. Kind of
Exactly.
mentality among those extorters. Yeah, as I said, Australia, they weren't happy. That's to say the least, because the Minister of Cybersecurity, Claire O'Neill, came out on TV and in one of the weekends that I was there, she said that Australia is now preparing to set up a permanent operation to hack the hackers. So they're gonna hack back, meaning that they want to hit them in the teeth. They really want to hurt them as well, because they were hurting them, and you can see it in yellow. One of the quotes that she said is hunting down the scumbags who are responsible for those malicious crimes against innocent people, because the Australian people were really affected by those leaks. So 100 personnel from the Australian Federal Police combined with the Australian Signals Directorate will form a new group, and their immediate priority is targeting ransomware groups as a reaction to those Optus and Medibank breaches. So they're going to go after them and they're going to try to hack them back with any means possible. So basically,
And this kind of
it's
builds off of
open
what we've
war.
been saying about the, yeah, yeah. And this is what we've been saying, like in some of the raids and arrest sections, that, as the threat landscape continues to escalate and as more people are arrested, more action takes place, that the escalation of the landscape is going to continue, that we're
Yeah.
going to see more violence, we're going to see more attacks, we're going to see more
For
takedowns.
every action,
Uh,
there's a reaction. Yeah.
yep.
And that leads to
There's,
escalation if it keeps on acting and reacting and acting and reacting. So those hackers, if they get hacked by by Australia, you can be sure that they will come back at Australia.
and Australia's been very public in the news about saying they know who the hackers behind these
Oh
events
yeah,
are and
yeah,
they
yeah,
want Russia to extradite them. They want to get
yeah.
their hands on
Yeah,
them.
well,
Uh,
if I was Australia, I wouldn't expect too much from Russia at this point. Um, I don't
no, but I mean, definitely we can say like Splinternet as a physical thing as well, as far as like if you engage in these hacktivist campaigns or you engage in these hacking campaigns with
yeah,
organized groups,
yeah,
you might not be able to leave your country anymore in the future. Like they Australia might know exactly who these kids are and know that the second they leave their country, their harboring region, that they're done.
yeah.
And something that we'll cover later in raids and arrests about how some of these people flee or go on vacation, and
Yeah.
next thing they know, there's a huge
Yeah.
international operation just to pick them up where they are. And
Yeah, we already talked about the blurring lines of those nation state and crime groups. Where does the nation state begin and the crime group end, or how do they leverage? How does nation state leverage crime groups? Because if you look at it, what those crime groups are doing, and the reason that Russia lets them do, is they are causing chaos in the Western world, which plays in the narrative of the Kremlin, because that's exactly what the Kremlin wants. They want to cause chaos in the Western world. So why would they basically would prefer to call them heroes than to put them in jail. That's
yep,
why I think that our evil, when Biden and Putin sat together in Geneva in the beginning of the year in 2020 of this year, and then had that, okay, our evil is picked up and we put them in jail. I think they put them in a holiday resort with an action to actually calculate how they gonna attack Western countries starting February 24th, because Putin already had a plan in motion to start February 24th. You're not gonna tell me that he didn't plan that at least 1 month before he did his invasion. So he was
right,
already
right.
aware what's gonna happen. So putting our evil in jail, that's like, okay, why would he have done that? And by the way, they came out a couple of weeks after the war started, because they are more of an asset than they are fighting against the regime in Russia.
Yeah, they were so mad at that group for not paying their taxes on the money they stole from most of the West, and then automatically just released them like that.
Yeah.
Definitely suspicious, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in Australia and the outcome as far as
Oh, for
hacking
sure.
back and
Yeah, yeah.
the community buy-in that goes in
It's
with
gonna
that.
be
Because
interesting
last
times.
year last year you said hacking back and people were like, no, 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 no. And now you say hacking back and people are just kind of quiet, like, well, let's hear your proposal,
Yeah,
which just shows that how much things are changing when it comes
yeah,
down to the conversation of targeting those that target you.
yeah, exactly.
Speaking of being targeted, there's a little section here on government alerts. Basically, the CISA and the FBI issued two different alerts. Um, Specifically about DDoS attacks. I see. I've lost control here. There we go. I got it back.
Yeah,
I
sorry, I
moved my
was
mouse around
muting.
too much.
Yeah.
So
No, no, no. I was muting my microphone because I was coughing. I don't want to cough in everybody's ear.
so the CISA put out this advisory, understanding and responding to a DDoS attack. It's in coordination with the FBI and also MSISAC. The advisory provides organizations with proactive steps reducing the likelihood and impact of a DDoS attack. I don't know so much about reducing the likelihood. If you're holding the lightning rod, you're going to get struck by lightning. But sometimes you kind of have to hold the lightning rod in the industry that we work in. So naturally you're going to be targeted. But anyways, they get into talking about how to understand your critical assets and services. This is something that we talk about quite often as far as red teaming and auditing your networks and making sure that you actually understand your network. But you also want to understand your users and how they connect to your network, right? So this is something that's kind of changing recently as far as remote culture and work from home because of the pandemic. A lot of people are using personal devices to connect to corporate clouds or corporate devices to connect to public clouds, and there's all kinds of issues that roll around with that. Um, they're also suggesting that people enroll in DDoS protection service. And this is something as a DDoS mitigations company, we see all the time as people say, why do I need service if I'm not under attack? And there's a lot of different types of services out there that you can talk to sales engineers about as far as always on or prim or a cloud base. A lot of different types of packages that you can get out there that are not necessarily always on and there when you need it. But it's nice to see the government agencies understand that this is an important part of a security posture for any organization.
Yeah, and an
Also
assessment.
understand,
Yeah, so don't forget to do the assessment because that is something that we are actually recording a series on red teaming right now, which we will publish
yeah,
next year. And it's so important because we saw so many assets that had their web applications fully protected with the best of the best protection that they can offer their applications. But then they forgot that their DNS was hosted somewhere where there's no DNS protection. So the attacker is smart enough. They go after the DNS, and if your host cannot be resolved for your application, even though it's in premium state, will never be reached. So you're down. So assessments are also an important part of that equation.
and something I didn't know until I got into the industry is that there's actually companies out there that do DDoS assessments
Hmm.
legally. So if you're looking for that, you can look at companies like Red Button and Zero BS, and there's a lot of other out there as well that will do exactly what Pascal said: is find those little misconfigurations or issues that you have in your network that
Yeah.
you didn't know.
Red teaming
Um,
and pen
and,
testing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it also goes a little further into this alert as far as understanding how your service providers defend against these attacks. And a lot of time people assume that your service provider is going to stop all these attacks, and it's not necessarily the case in certain types of attacks. And also understanding your edge network too. Surprisingly enough, most people in this industry do not understand their edge network. So it's easy to have those misconfigurations and misdevices that are easily targeted. And this kind of goes back into review and design, right? So the threat intelligence lifecycle and also network designing. You want to sit down and review these kind of things. You want to make sure that you haven't missed anything, and that gets back to like assets and all that other fun stuff. But this is more of an organizational level, having conversations with your executives, but also developing a DDoS response plan when you're talking with those executives, because most organizations don't have a DDoS response plan. Most people out there think that DDoS is a very minimal thing, nothing to worry about. But there's been great reminders since February 24th about how serious DDoS is and how it can impact your organization.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're going to want to have a DDoS continuity plan. So a response plan and continuity plan of how to actually respond to the attack and mitigate the attack, but also what to do while you're actually offline, and how to deal with that as far as a PR perspective as well.
Yeah, dealing with the
Um,
press is very important also. That's where your
And then the
reputation.
second to last one here is actually a really good one: is how do DDoS attacks impact your physical backups on your network? So as something that we've seen is triple extortion with ransomware groups, right? So ransomware groups are going to attack you. They're going to try and go for your backups, and if you're completely prepared, you actually have your backups, and you don't have to deal with the negotiation. You can tell them to bug off, and what they'll end up doing is they'll start launching DDoS attacks against your network and also against your clients as a way to bring you back to the negotiation table. But sometimes those DDoS attacks that they're launching are intended to actually prevent you from accessing those backups. So something to kind of consider there when dealing with ransomware is how would a DDoS attack actually impact your network? And also to conduct DDoS tabletop exercises. This is something I'm very pro about, just mind games and talking about possible what ifs. Just let your imagination run wild and just sit there and try and come up with different exercises and how you'd respond to those. What if the Russians were to launch a giant DDoS attack against root servers? What if a pro nation state group launches a DDoS attack against you because you're indirectly related to a war? These are some things that people don't think about. And if you actually sit there once a month for an hour and talk about different types of attacks that you see publicly, and then try and take those lessons from it. What if this happened to us? What if Optus happened to us? What if Medibank happened to us? And just kind of run through those examples and figure out exactly what you're going to do. So that was more or less like on the side of preparing for DDoS attacks, right? But also in this advisory, let's see, third time's a charm. Woo! uh, how to respond to DDoS attacks. So if you're experiencing DDoS attack, the CISA suggests that you confirm that you're underneath a DDoS attack, which is as funny of a statement this is, it can be very confusing for most network operators that, is it a DDoS attack? Is it a credential stuffing attack? Is it a misconfiguration or some kind of oops that happened inside the network? All kinds of things happen, right?
We've
So
seen that so many
confirming that,
times.
yeah, it's so many times you need to call, we're under DDoS attack. Well, how do you know that? And it's the first step you need to kind of take there. But you also need to contact your ISP and have a conversation with them so they don't black hole you and all kinds of other negative issues that happen. And you also want to understand the nature of the hack. So specifically, like in 2015, when we were protecting Proton Mail, there was a series of attacks that happened over 7 days where basically the attacker had targeted the network infrastructure of Proton Mail inside of data center. Then they moved to the peers uprange because they didn't cause enough impact, so they start targeting Proton Mail's peers around Europe, which caused them to have a lot of commotion. A lot of people came back down and said, "Hey, pay the ransom." And this is part of the understanding the attack is understanding what is the objective. And at that point in time, the objective was a DDoS for extortion campaign. They wanted $5,000 basically, and they were going to go to extensive FARs targeting upstream providers, which is a little bit of an advanced tactic. Most people kind of give up. They just want to attack your public facing websites and hopefully you'll pay money. But with other attackers, they do know how to walk up the network. So understanding those attacks is very important, specifically to know how to deploy mitigation techniques, right? So if you don't really understand the nature of the attack, you're not going to understand what kind of mitigation techniques that you need to put in place in order to monitor those to defend against those devices. You also want to monitor other network assets. A lot of times, once you get mitigation in place and you stop that DDoS attack, the attacker is gonna go looking for other lower hanging fruit. So they're gonna swing around and look for these other network devices to target. They also suggest using, they being CISA, suggest using mitigation techniques outlined in the MS-ISAC guide, which I think we'll have in the notes or links into this after
Mhm.
the presentation. But what to do during a DDoS attack is continue to monitor other network assets, as we mentioned, update your DDoS response plan. So once you're attacked, don't just kind of walk away from it and say, job done. Sit down there with your threat intelligence teams and try and figure out exactly what you could do next time to better prepare yourself and proactively monitor your networks all the time. You just never know. If you're under attack of a main flood or a micro flood that Pascal will talk about later, there's all different types of floods that can actually impact your network. Sorry, that's a lot there, and
Yeah,
this is not
yeah, and
the
to
only alert.
for so yeah,
I'm
time
sorry, I
out
talk fast to
for
get through
yeah
these things, guys.
for
Time out on the
for
pitch.
for the people who want that information that Daniel was referring to. Indeed, there's a link in the comments or in the description below. And if you follow that link, you will come on GitHub, and there is a whole list of all the references for every slide and for everything that we are talking about. So you can go through that file, can find the right chapter, and then you just go to that link to get more information.
So another resource that's going to be down there is going to be the private industry notification from the FBI. This was kind of like in the parallel at the same time that the CISA had released their uh, guide about how to deal with a DDoS attack, and this was hacktivists use DDoS
Hey,
attacks to
bro.
cause minor impacts.
Yeah, it's like one is talking, hey, be careful for Dita, and the other one, bro,
Well,
it's gonna cause
in my
minor
personal
impacts.
opinion,
It's like,
yeah, but like in my personal opinion, the CISA alert is very detailed, right?
mhm,
It gets into
which is
many
good.
different things about how to deal with it and what to consider as far as DDoS attacks go. I feel like the FBI report is very much trying to downplay DDoS attacks. That I think they lost control of the narrative over the last few months related to the
Well, yeah,
pro-Russian
I think.
hacktivists and the DDoS attacks.
Yeah, we saw that happening with the attacks in October on the U.S. airports because the media ran wild with those attacks, and that actually played into the advantage of Killnet. And actually, the day after Killnet, remember, came back and posted a similar message saying that J.P. Morgan Chase was having a global outage because of an attack that they were doing, and everybody was asking questions. Hey, J.P. Morgan, what's going on? And they were not aware of anything. So
Right.
that was more of a psychological operation. Following that success of the day before, they just posted that message and people ran with it, and yeah, it caused impact for J.P. Morgan. They were on the back
And that's
foot.
kind Yeah, that's kind of like Killnet's like MO right there, right? Their
Hmm.
TTPs
Hmm.
as far as
Exactly.
like they'll launch these DDoS attacks against public facing sites that aren't protected, and then they'll follow it up with a massive target. So like before we saw, I think it was Lockheed Martin that they
Yeah,
claimed they targeted,
the same
and then it was
thing.
JP Morgan, and then with this latest rave, they keep saying that they targeted Starlink, which is undetermined at the
Hmm.
moment. But it's a typical pattern where they target all these small organizations and they claim this big one. There's not a
Yeah.
lot of information to prove it, but hey, we DDoS these other people, so it must be true, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the FBI is kind of dealing with. They're trying to deal with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that was put out there by a lot of media coverage, but they're trying to bring it back here. And they basically talk about how DDoS attacks require little technical knowledge to leverage public available resources and tools to disrupt public facing websites. Now,
That's what makes
this is
them
true,
popular. Yeah.
but I have to give credit where credit's due to bot herders, like people that actually go out there and create it Maris and create it fucking create it Mariah.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, we're just gonna have to censor that there. There are people out there that actually do have skilled abilities to launch these DDoS attacks, like people that can walk up the network and they actually understand what to target, when to target, and how to
Mhm.
target it. But for the most part, like 99% of the people launching DDoS attacks are going to be, they're going to be minor impacts. They're going to be low-level actors that
Well, yeah,
really don't know what they're doing other than paying a service to launch attacks for them, right?
that's a little
And
bit
that's
of
something that we,
yeah, that's a little bit the consequence of the IT army and putting that information out there and putting out tutorials and basically democratizing DDoS attacks so that everybody comes within reach of doing it. There's YouTube videos that are out there that explain how to download the script, how to run it, how to perform a DDoS attack. But that's those are probably the DDoS attacks that cause minor impacts. But then you have the real guys, as Daniel said, who know their tools, who know how to perform the attacks, who survey your networks, and who will come back with a serious attack and who will pivot whenever you put mitigation in place. They will pivot their attacks and they will keep on putting pressure on the target. And the attack will not go away in a couple of seconds or minutes like they do with some hacktivist attacks.
yeah. And so basically, the FBI wanted to talk about how these low-level threat actors are doing high-profile targeting. So they're looking at financial institutes, they're looking at health organizations, medical facilities, emergency services. We've seen that recently with 911 services being targeted. Airports has been all over the place, government facilities, EU Parliament, government websites for elections. They're using these easily available tools to go after high-profile targets, but they're doing it only to target public-facing websites. So there's very minimal impact. I will give FBI credit there.
Mhm.
But hacktivists also are known to claim responsibility for attacks on social media that are sometimes not true to increase their exposure. So this gets back to what we were talking about as far as Killnet launching these series of attacks against small organizations and claiming a big one, hoping to get the benefit of the doubt and the credit of launching these attacks. They also recycle a lot of information. So this was kind of like an old anonymous technique that I think a lot of these pro-hacktivists that are part of the Ukraine-Russian war are using, where they're trying to disseminate, I wouldn't say fake information, but previously disclosed information to try and build credibility. So they might try to find a leak that no one's found on some obscure
Yeah,
forum and
like
repost
what
it
happened
saying,
with Lockheed Martin, yeah, and KillNet.
yeah, exactly. As a way to try and build that credibility. But the problem is that a lot of these kids don't have a lot of skills. They don't understand research and analysis out there that we can quickly look into this. We have all kinds of OSINT tools to figure out, is this a lie? Is this real? And that hurts their credibility as well. So it's something to look for as far as if you want to discredit these hacktivists, look for the false information they're pushing out. That will actually damage their campaigns more than anything out there. It's a way of hacking back against hacktivists. And they also, hacktivists may post news coverage about their attacks. So once again, something that we see commonly with KillNet, that are running straight to their Telegram channel after they get the check host URL that shows that it's been down, they post it up. But that also can lead to copycat attacks, and that's something that we see quite often with RDoS campaigns, extortion DDoS campaigns, where a group will go out there claiming to be a certain name, launch attacks, and then you'll see someone come around. So
Mhm.
specifically like Armada Collective and DD4BC, these are groups that have been taken down and arrested, but still somewhat operate today because other people are using their names, not because the original actors are there. So into the second part of the FBI alert about how they suggest organizations implement recommendations to reduce the likelihood and impact of DDoS attacks. This is where I say like the difference between the two alerts is kind of interesting because the FBI is very minimal on their suggestions here. They say enroll in a DDoS service, create a partnership with your ISP, create disaster
Well,
recovery
yeah,
plan, and monitor
it's
your
pretty much the
networks.
same, but maybe in less detail, right? And
Yeah, that's why I like the CISA one where they get a little
yeah,
bit more further into thought as far as doing
hmm
tabletop exercises, red team,
yeah,
blue team exercises,
yeah.
a little bit more of a holistic approach over there. But the
Both
FBI is
have
not
their
wrong.
value. No,
Yeah,
I like how they position that because yeah, there are different types of attacks and different kinds of actors out there, and depending which actor you are facing, you might rather be in the CISA document kind of scenario, or you might be in the FBI kind of scenario. So
I mean, just to close this up, I'll say that CISA has been doing a great job this year when it
mhm.
comes down to informing people. I know they've taken a little bit of a cheerleading perspective, but I think that's kind of what's needed now after time has gone by, that we need people out there cheering on people, letting them know it's okay to get knocked down, get back
Hey,
up. This is how you
if you
do it.
want
This is how
people's
you build back.
attention, what do you do?
Yeah.
You need cheerleaders, right?
Yep, you need people out there to let people know to get back
Yeah,
up and tell them that's going to be okay and give them the plan to succeed. And I think that's the way
yeah.
to build back better there for sure. So moving on to the next section. So this chapter, extortion campaigns. So this is something that we like to cover quite often. It ranges from hack and leak campaigns, ransomware to DDoS attacks. Specifically with this first example, it was none. Sometimes they also can be fake extortionist groups. So this new
Hoaxes, yeah.
extortionist group is called, yeah, hoaxes, calling themselves Team Monsanto. Horrible name in my opinion, but okay if you want to run with it. But it's being reported by Bleeping Computer, and I think also what was his name from Australia, Troy Hunt,
hmm
was also reporting this as well because he was a targeted victim. Uh, so website owners and admins worldwide, basically people that run their own blogging site or government agencies or even large corporations, got these letters via email. It's basically from a hacker claiming that they've compromised the server and they want $2,500 in Bitcoin under threat, basically to leak stolen data and damage their reputation. So this is pretty much the normal TTPs of an extortion campaign. The group was using two Bitcoin addresses. This is something that came from Bleeping Computer because they had visibility on a lot of these letters. So you kind of understand that they're somewhat legitimate in the fact that they really want that money. Most of the people just scam and spam. They use
Yeah.
all different types of addresses, but um, this came through a mass email scam. There was no actual impact to servers. It was basically more of a fear, uncertainty, and doubt type of letter to try and get people to send them money. I guess from the blockchain, observing the two IP addresses, some people had fallen for the scam and sent them money, which is kind of
Yeah.
sad. Guess it's not a lot in comparison to some of the extortion
Well,
campaigns,
yeah,
but definitely.
that that is their prerogative. They put in a low amount so that you would think, well, maybe it's easier to pay the 2,500 and make it go away than to have to ask a big security company to come in and find out if I was hacked and what data was accessed and what sensitive data, and then I have to go report it. And this will cost me hundreds of thousands, all the consultancy and then the reporting, and maybe get a fine on top of that because of I did not secure my system. So 2,500 US dollars seems reasonable to make it all go away overnight, right? That's what they
Especially if you
use.
don't want to tell
That's
anybody,
yeah,
that's the sad part is that that's what they prey on, that you might be in a bad position as far as, your IT organization goes, and that $2,500 is just a quick fix, no one finds out,
yeah.
nobody knows type of
Unless
thing. And
somebody finds out later, and if you're a CISO, you can still go to jail for that. You should not put it under the rug.
it's all risk and reward out
That's
here.
what
And
happened to the
we
Uber
say,
CISO, right?
yeah, exactly. The CISO got in a lot of trouble for not properly following the steps that they need to follow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting campaign here. We do see this a lot when it comes down to extortion campaigns, specifically with DDoS extortion campaigns, where the threat is not exactly valid, where they don't launch demo tests or anything like that. They're just simply mass spamming everybody, hoping to get someone to pay. You think about it, if you're a threat actor, you put together this letter, it takes you about 15 minutes because you're probably copying and pasting it from everybody. And then you spend the next 45 minutes spamming the whole world. For one person to pay you $2,500 is
Yeah.
pretty good money for an hour's worth of work. So, it's all about statistics when it comes down to this, and it's all about risk analysis. And
Low hanging
if you get
fruit.
one of these letters, yeah, if you get one of these letters, just ignore them. If you're really concerned about it, maybe contact your IT department and try to trigger some kind of investigation or audit. But yeah, don't respond to these people. It's a really bad idea. Ransom denial of service. Speaking of bad ideas here, this is kind of a wild one, right? So we didn't see this one directly. It's something I found on Twitter, but there were several people one day start tweeting about these DDoS attacks that were coming from either security researchers or bug bounty hunters. And this person was claiming basically that they could stop the attack, right? So, haha, hee hee, I launched a DDoS attack. I'll stop the DDoS attack if you pay me $5,000 in Bitcoin. So a little more than the last one. But this is where things kind of get interesting. As I was following Ryan's thread over here, and he ended up disclosing not only how the attack came in and how they defended against it, but also about how this Twitter account, specifically John, had messaged him demanding the $5,000 in Bitcoin, which is likely a SOC account, but it just shows you that these people are very persistent, that if you don't answer these emails and you don't answer these support chat messages, that they might actually go as far as messaging you on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook as a way to actually contact you. Bad OPSEC, but you're probably not making the right decisions in life if you're running a ransom denial of service campaign to begin with.
Yeah.
Just going to be brutally honest with that one.
What you call that,
Moving
an
into,
ethical hacker?
yeah, exactly.
Going after bug
So,
bounties. Yeah.
the anti-ethical hacker, I guess. I don't know what you'd call that, but into other tactics and techniques here when it comes down to extortion, this is very, very interesting one here. Is Anonymous Russia exploring DDoS extortion techniques? Now, we're not going to say this is DDoS for extortion because it's unconfirmed, and the way this is phrased is almost like they lost money and they just want money returned, and they're going to launch a DDoS attack in response. This happens a lot where people buy services on a hosting provider and
Yeah.
they're doing criminal things and they have their service turned off, and they're she paid up for 30 days, but they lost their service after one, so they want their money back. But anyways, Anonymous Russia posts in their Telegram channel, very legitimate channel where they've launched other attacks against U.S. government and things like that, that they want their 300 euros back from Barrow.
Yeah.
This was really kind of
Barrow
funny when I
dot
saw the
yeah,
channel.
it's barrow dash host.de. You can see it in the screenshot of the page that's down. So that's a hosting provider.
Yeah, in Germany, right?
Yeah,
Which
DE
is
is
kind of out
Germany.
of pace there. Like normally these hosting providers that they're using are in Netherlands, but
Ho ho ho
and they're
ho! Be careful there.
starting fire for other slides there. But yeah, so this is not a typical technique that's used by hacktivists, like at all. Hacktivists generally do not get into extortion Like the only extortion they get into is we stole your data and we want to admit you're wrong. But I mean, I've seen several hacktivists have stolen data from multi-million-dollar companies. Those companies have offered to pay them money not to leak it. They don't want the money. They just want the shame. They want the embarrassment. They want the reputation damage. And that's normally what hacktivists go for. Here, it's weird to see someone that's running a campaign specifically for Anonymous Russia asking for $300, I guess, back. Uh,
Yeah, they're
but
probably
yeah,
just pissed about So Barrowhost probably got an abuse, and they investigated and they found out, okay, these guys are doing not legal stuff on my servers here, so I'm gonna stop immediately their service. And yeah, so they probably pissed off, and yeah, when they're pissed off,
so
they
this
do
is
DDoS attacks. Disgruntled employees. What's the easiest way to show them that you are angry? Do a DDoS attack. It's been going on
and
for
this
ages.
this was a great example though. Like this was kind of a fun one because like Pascal and I got to sit down, we looked at this and we're trying to figure out what was the actual action, right? Like what
Mm.
was going on.
Why
That's
why
part of
300
research.
euros? Because yeah, if you say I'm gonna do ransom DOS, you're not gonna ask 300 euros, right? It's like a
Right. And so
strange
part of
amount.
like research is trying to discount or accept things, right? And so
Yeah.
we sat there all afternoon saying, no, it's
Yeah,
not
by
DDoS for
by
extortion. There
by
could
the way, yeah. So by the way, if they would ask for if it would be ransom DDoS, they would put in a Bitcoin address and ask an amount in Bitcoin. But here they're just saying return the 300 euros. So that means that their account is known by Barrowhost, and they just ask for a return of 300 euros, right? They're not asking
yeah,
for
exactly.
send it to this account. So it's not a ransom DDoS attack, but it's more of a pissed off customer that is not happy because they paid and their service has been turned off, kind of thing.
So while we're sitting there running through this whole thing, trying to
Yeah.
basically discount the idea that they're running a DDoS for extortion campaign, we sit there saying there's no way hacktivists run extortion campaigns. It's just not in their
Yes.
TPPs. It's not in their playbook. And then what happens? This is the fun part about research that I absolutely love. When you get into intelligence, you sit there and you're trying to discount something, and then all of a sudden, here comes another threat group to prove you wrong right after you proved your
Yeah.
thesis right. Uh, and so, like, as we're sitting there talking about how hacktivists generally do not carry out extortion campaigns, KillNet launches an extortion campaign. So sometimes you got to take the good of the bad, and sometimes you just got to say, "What is it? Belagon, chaos." Just you got to accept things as they come. Anyways, KillNet launched a campaign against the Latvia state revenue. So KillNet targeted a vulnerable employee and gained access to their VPN, and they're demanding 10 Bitcoin from the state revenue. This is pretty interesting, and this kind of goes back to what we've been talking about from the very first slide: is the tactics and techniques and procedures of these pro state-sponsored hacktivist groups are changing. That DDoS only is so effective for a certain point in time, and that going into the next year, you just can't launch DDoS attacks for 2 years. You're going to have to escalate. You're going to have to choose new ways to impact your victims, and we're starting to see this play out right now in the holiday season with pro state-sponsored hacktivists launching these attacks. Pretty interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the email because they just throw that out all unredacted. Nice
Yeah,
of
I mean, this was on their Telegram channel. There's
yeah.
tons of other screenshots that they posted. This was just
Yeah.
the one I ran with, and maybe I should have redacted this a little bit. But you know what? The link is going to be there
Yeah.
below. You're going to see it anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll just show everybody what that is. Pretty interesting, though, when you get into the extortion campaigns that we've seen this month. Now, moving into the midterm elections. So, as we're all familiar, the United States had the midterm elections this last month in November. And there was a lot of chaos surrounding the possibilities of what could and couldn't happen. Um, I think we're all kind of familiar with how elections get hacked. So I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on that. But it really comes down to hacking the human or hacking devices. And so I did this interview with Cyber News and basically talked about some of the subjects coming up related to the midterm election. So this is past already, but some of the most significant threats to the is coming from within the United States in these elections. So it's something I talked about briefly about how our politicians, even citizens in the United States, have become immune to Russian hacking, and they've actually learned the tactics, techniques, and procedures used by state-sponsored hackers to learn how to manipulate their own counterpart. So that's, we saw what's his name. political opposition, spacing on his name right now, but pro Republican that told people to send letters into their election office, basically asking for records from the 2020 election, which caused a physical denial of service against the humans that were working inside the election office. They weren't actually able to perform their duties. Then you also have people like, your crazy Uncle Bob that's sitting on Facebook, taking conspiracy theories, putting a single truth into it, and having people buy into it, right? So this is why I say the most significant threat to the election is actually us versus our enemy overseas. But compromising election infrastructure is very difficult, and this is something that CISA and everybody else in the industry has posted reports that you need to physically get access to these devices. It's not so easy to remote in, control these things, and change numbers. Specifically, what we really kind of see during these attacks or during the elections is attacks against public-facing websites, but that's something I'll get into in a minute. And it's not just nation state, as I said, it's usually independent people. So it's our own politicians, it's our own citizens. They've all learned how to manipulate people, and this is what they're doing.
Yeah,
That's
it's
something that can be
influencing campaigns. It's not really hacking and cracking actual voting systems. It's influencing the people.
yeah, manipulation is way easier than compromising a device. And that's kind of like my main point there is that,
Yeah.
it's easier for me to go on Facebook and convince 100 people to vote for a candidate than it is for me to go compromise just one election device, right? And
Yeah.
there's only one of me. So it's not like I can drive around all of Denver and hit all these devices. So people are learning this, and they're also learning that
Optic.
attribution is very difficult, right? So it's hard for people to prove that you did it, specifically when you look into like how we attribute Russia as helping the Donald Trump campaign in 2016. Sorry, got ahead of myself there. But yeah, in general, the elections are a giant mess when it comes down to who's hacking us because we're learning how to hack ourselves, and this is going to become a problem how we control ourselves. And something I've talked about a little bit as far as that we need to respect people one more. You know, I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about religion and politics. We didn't get into it. Nowadays on the internet, everybody has to talk about it. Everybody has to have an opinion. And because of that, we're making ourselves more vulnerable by exposing more information that we believe in. And this is something I covered a little bit more deeper in my byline that I wrote for Help Net Security, basically talking about how the biggest threat to our American election system is ourselves, right? And this is kind of the same thing I was just saying in the last slide is that we're learning how to manipulate people on our own. We're learning how to manipulate our social circles, and it's benefiting political parties. It's either helping the left or helping the right or helping the middle. Um, but now it's kind of fair to say that going into the midterm elections and also the main elections that widespread attempts to subvert the election process in the United States might pose as a more significant threat against our democracy than what we might imagine from foreign state-sponsored threat actors. Because at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make here is that we're manipulating people more often and we're making ourselves more vulnerable, which makes it easier for these foreign state sponsors to come in. So when you're looking at like the future election or the midterm election, all these foreign state sponsored threat actors had to do was just manipulate and amplify, or not manipulate, amplify the message that people, citizens, and politicians are putting out inside the United States. They don't have to create the message anymore. In fact, they don't even have to compromise us and set our computers for a year and trying to get all this information like they did in 2016. They just need to watch our Facebook pages and promote people's posts to cause chaos. And it's really that simple. It's really that easy. And I kind of fear what's going to happen in the main election in 2024. But specifically, what happened during the midterm elections is that we did see DDoS attacks. So specifically, the election website in Mississippi and Illinois were knocked offline during the midterm elections. So it was the Secretary of State website in Mississippi and then the clerk office in Illinois. Now, the clerk office in Illinois had been repeatedly targeted from the KillNet campaign that was targeting government organizations or public-facing websites, and it rolled over into the midterms. The Secretary of State of Mississippi was specifically targeted by the cyber army of Russia. And they posted about this that they're going to do it. They posted that they did it, which gets into the whole thing of like, once again, do you want to cover this? Do you want to get attention? Yes, I do want to cover it. But I also want to say that these attacks had no impact on the election process. They only took out public facing websites that had general information about where these election sites and polling sites were. If you're waiting to the last day to find out where a polling site is, not my problem. Is be prepared going into election. Maybe know the polling place a day or two before the DDoS attacks come in, but it was definitely something that we saw. So jumping
So
out of the election.
concluding
Oh.
for the election as an external uh, person who's not in the U.S. External observer. That is the word that I was looking for.
A foreigner
So
that's not a
yeah,
state-sponsored threat actor.
yeah. So basically, what's gonna determine the president in 2024 is the person with the biggest troll factory. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, the troll factory is going to be a big thing in the future, and how other people manipulate other people's information is definitely going to have an impact
Yeah,
on elections. And
we have seen so many misinformation botnets already, and it's gonna come back here at the end of the presentation again. That Ukraine again found another misinformation botnet, and the troll factories in Russia. We all know where that came from, and even the West has their troll botnets that we discovered that we talked about on an earlier episode. So.
they also have troll Twitter accounts, but we'll get into that in a second. Okay,
Yep.
so here we go.
Who's
Sorry, we do
playing
this for a
right
long
now?
time. Yeah, I know the score, but I'm not telling Pascal.
Yeah, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. We're doing so bad at this moment.
He,
It's all or
he's like me
nothing.
when I was watching. Yeah, it's like me when I was watching the United States Iranian game. It's very serious, for other reasons,
Yeah.
national pride mainly. But the 2022 FIFA World Cup is underway currently in Qatar, and it's something that we've talked about from a Radware perspective, and something that we're observing currently in real time. But we want to talk about a little bit of the threats related to the World Cup. So, as I mentioned, Radware has issued an alert and advisory about the threats that could be posed against not only the operators but the fans, specifically what threat actors are looking for, and in general, any large sporting event. It doesn't have to be just the FIFA World Cup. It could be the Super Bowl, it could be the Olympics, it could be whatever. Reputation damage, basically undermining authority via DDoS, defacement, and disinformation campaigns are going to be pretty much the run of the mill. This is what they're trying to do as far as causing a service outage or preventing people from entering a stadium, which might lead people to think that the games or the event is not properly secure. We also see a lot of informational theft, credential access directed organizations and sponsors prior to the event. So a lot of the more advanced threat actors are going to be looking to harvest credentials from the sponsors and organizers before the event, so they can actually impact and disrupt the event while it happens. On the other side of it, you see attendees targeted during the event. So these are a lot of scams related to information theft and credential access as well, but these are going to be more related to access to live streaming, or access to tickets, or access to closed information that
Betting
they didn't
services,
necessarily. Betting services,
gaming
exactly,
and betting. Yeah, we see.
which is what we see is growing bigger and bigger. I mean, the betting industry is just. I mean, every other commercial here in the United States during the soccer matches are, or should I say football? I don't know. That's a huge argument there alone. It's for a betting service, right? And you look at the advertisements, betting services everywhere. It's definitely a huge impact there. Statistical websites, who's winning, who's losing. I'm sure Pascal might be refreshing, just not telling us. A simple DDoS that comes into that service would make him very upset for the rest of this podcast here.
No,
And
actually, I
there's
would be
also.
happy with one because I want to watch it after live.
So if you're out there, just DDoS the World Cup right now, so Pascal
So
can.
yeah, but you can still do some disinformation attack on me and tell me what the score is not.
Well, I'll put it this way: it's 3-0, but you can figure out who's winning.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody watching right now? So also some of the other attacks that we see directed at large sporting events come from state-sponsored retaliation. So this is something that we've seen specifically from the Russians, and this is the reason why they're banned from the World Cup at the moment. They're banned from the Olympics. They engage in several different harassment campaigns and doping related campaigns where they attack the anti-doping organizations
Right.
because they got caught doping. But in the 2018 Winter Olympics, the Russians launched this giant attack against the opening ceremonies, Olympic Destroyer. We're all familiar with that, I believe. And that actually prevented someone like me from entering the stadium for the opening ceremonies. And that's where it gets into, we're tied back into undermining authority, right? When that attack was launched, a lot of us didn't know what was going on. Even some of us in the industry didn't know what was going on. It was just simple. Network wasn't working, couldn't scan my ticket, can't get in the stadium. Everybody's sitting on TV saying that the stadium's empty. That has an impact, right? When everybody sees an empty stadium during an open ceremony, specifically during the Winter Olympics, it starts getting into undermining their authority and undermining their actual network, which is something you kind of consider if you're hosting a large sporting event and say a country like Russia is banned, you might see an attack like that. Now, a lot of us thought that we were going to see some kind of opening ceremony attack from the Russians or some kind of retaliation attack from the Iranians, but it's something that we actually did not see during this event so far. We have not seen any state-sponsored related attacks, but there
So
have been several, let's call it organized
yeah,
crime-related
I
attacks.
I think Russia is busy with something else at this moment. They're probably
What would
too
that
busy.
be?
So I would expect it more from the other area, the ones that were requested, where Anonymous requested them to be banned and to put Ukraine instead.
Right. And that's actually a slide I forgot to put in here, but Pascal's 100% correct on that. Leading up to the FIFA World Cup, Anonymous launched several defacement and DDoS attacks against FIFA and Qatar as a way to try and remove Iran from the actual World Cup because of the violent protests in their country, but also as a way to try and insert Ukraine soccer team in a replacement for Iran. Now, as we know, none of that worked out for them. Those DDoS attacks were pointless, but they kind of gone away since their attacks were minor impacts. The FBI would be happy to hear that. But the real threat actors kind of stepped in a little bit more advanced other than skids. We saw Zscaler put out this report about how organized crime groups are actually targeting fans and spectators with fake live streaming outlets. So they observed a spike in new live streaming services with newly registered domains. So that's kind of something that researchers look at how old a domain is when it's into streaming services, right? So like if the streaming service had been around since 2018 when the other World Cup was in Russia, then it might be a little bit more legitimate. But you see a random service just pops up overnight with a newly registered domain, likely is going to be illegitimate. Uh, Using legitimate websites and portals to post fake streaming services. So, they're going on to Facebook, they're going on Twitter, they're going on Telegram, and they're posting at these links to these fake streaming services. And of course, everybody like Pascal right now is trying to go watch the game. They're opening up these videos, in
I
hopes to
have
catch the
I have my
stream.
service provider where I can stream from. I don't need an IPTV pirate.
There's other people out there, okay, that don't have accessibility to these kind of things, right?
I
So
I would
they're
do
look
that for Formula One while I was in Australia trying to watch the game because I was geo-blocked on my own service because I was coming from the another continent. So, and at that moment I wanted to see the F1. So yeah, at that moment I might have been vulnerable to F1 streaming scams. Luckily
So
they're out
next year
there.
we might be doing a report on F1 streaming scams, and we'll have to go
Yeah.
to a few GPs in order to get our
Yeah.
research done. But
Yeah.
knock on wood, hopefully we can get this project approved. But so the threat actors, they post these illegitimate links into legitimate websites and portals to try and get people to click on it. They're not only just related to online streaming, they're also related to World Cup tickets, airline tickets to get there, and also theme lottery as well as gambling services. Multiple malware families have been seen used in the FIFA World Cup event, and they're also targeting users with malicious cracked versions of FIFA soccer games. So if you can imagine, kids around the world are very excited about this. Their favorite players on TV. I'm sure they're spending a lot of time playing games after the match is on or before, depending on where in the world you are. But it makes it kind of easier for these criminals to manipulate and use the situation, specifically the lures related to the FIFA World Cup. And definitely has a larger impact there as far as like information stealers, credential harvesting, and all of that stuff that goes along with these type of scams.
Whenever there's attention, the scammers are there.
Right. So Trellix here posted up a really good report about 100% increase in email-based attacks against Arab countries in the build-up to the World Cup. Now that's 100% obvious. There's been a lot of controversy around the World Cup and specifically the first World Cup in the Arab country. but what ended up happening is people were threat actors, organized threat actors, were impersonating FIFA TMS. They're impersonating different soccer teams, so football clubs. They're impersonating ticket offices, fake legal notices, and even Snoo, which is, I guess, like their version of Grubhub/Wolf, which is food delivery services. But once again, these impersonated emails are being actually sent to people to get them. Okay, it's a phishing attack. It's basically a phishing attack where they're sending lures associated with the World Cup, designed to get people to click on links, and those links take them to websites that are dropping information harvesters. So Quackbot, Emotet, Formbook, Quad Agent. These are all very popular pieces of malware out there that are being delivered underneath the guise of FIFA-related phishing attacks to compromise users and steal information from them. Trying to control this again. It
Wait,
seems I've
I
lost
help you.
control. My
I
bad.
help you. Here you
There we
go.
go. There we go. Sorry about that. And also nation state trolling. So this was a little joke about the United States Twitter account. This got the United States in a lot of trouble. The United States Soccer Federation changed Iran's flag on social media. So if you notice over there on the right, the Iranian flag is missing its symbol, and that was the actual Islamic Republic symbol that was removed. They did this on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It was not only just posts, but it was also like the header on their social profile. Um,
How
the
official
post was
are
pretty.
they? They have a blue
Yeah, that's
and
because
a
everything's changed
silver.
with the Elon Musk.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So they are
Uh,
official, right?
yeah,
They are the
yeah,
real
yeah.
deal.
They've been
Yeah.
double verified, double verified. They got the
Okay.
blue check and they got the silver official badge.
Yeah. Okay.
I think in time, Elon Musk has said those blue checks are going to change to three different colors, but I'm not sure when that's happening. But yeah, very official. This is
Yeah.
this is legitimate from the United States Soccer Federation. They thought it'd be really funny to
Wow.
Photoshop the Islamic Republic emblem out of the flag, and they posted it up, and they got a lot of trouble very quickly. And I consider this a defacement. This is why I want to cover it
Hmm.
because
It is.
this is a legitimate defacement. It's an offensive defacement to the people of Iran. And they quickly had to delete this. The U.S. soccer team told CNN that they wanted to protest the violence in Iran. They wanted to show their support of women in Iran by doing this. They quickly found themselves in hot water. The State Department even had to come out and say this was not a coordinated effort. So, back to the whole Russian troll farm. Some people thought this might be actually run by the State Department. This might be actually a troll operation, but apparently they're claiming it was not. United States Soccer Federation removed this, and then Iran called for the United States
Yeah.
to be kicked out of the 2022 World Cup before the match.
For
As we
first,
all know,
first the American. Well, yeah, it's probably the American side of Anonymous calling to kick Iran out. Now Iran's calling, hey, kick out the U.S. Okay.
uh, very interesting
Interesting.
though. Like
Yeah, a lot
as
of
I said, like
drama on this FIFA. Non-football drama. There's a lot of drama in the football as well because some big leagues are playing bad and not winning enough. But next
and
to
some
the field.
players are very dramatic on the field too. I'm not very
Oh,
familiar with soccer or a
yeah,
soccer fan, but
the whole rainbow banning is also something that came up a couple of times.
it'd be like me going to Pascal, like I got DDoS with one packet. Ah, I'm dead. It's amazing to me watching these players claim that they're hurt, but you're watching a 4K instant slow replay, and clearly they weren't touched. But that's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother level of trolling. But I thought this was a really interesting thing to bring up here, as far as like uh, United States Soccer Federation actually trolling Iran by removing an
and
emblem from their
and
flag.
Iran calling to
And
kick them out. Yeah, this is funny.
and this kind of like fills into the TTPs of large sporting events, right? So
Mhm.
like we normally see DDoS
Mediatized.
attacks in some kind of network operation, and impact a network operation. We also generally see threat actors targeting fans and also network operators with credential harvesting, information stealer malware, and we also see the general protest lulls, trolling. There's other words for it that I can't say, but it kind of fits the MO of what we are expecting from FIFA at the moment with the World Cup.
Yeah, I help you. You're there.
There
Ah, vulnerabilities. Right, and I limited the number of vulnerabilities because there was quite some. There were some operational technology vulnerabilities as well, but I stuck to two very important ones. Well, I mean to cover. I'm not saying that the OpenSSL vulnerability is one to alert on highly, but that was a strange, kind of strange one. Now I understand the OpenSSL project after what happened with Log4Shell. They wanted to pre-announce the security community that they would be disclosing a critical vulnerability uh, in 1 week. That was basically what happened beginning of or end of October, I believe it was actually. Um, so everybody was like, yeah, building up suspense, you know. It's almost there. They're gonna announce it, and even on the day itself, the guy who was responsible I'm still writing the blog. I'm gonna post it soon. So like everybody was sitting there with a hard on, manner of speaking. But then when it dropped, it was actually like, oh, okay, yeah, good, okay. So it
CVE trolling. All right.
we're close, yeah. So it was a high uh criticality. It was a remote control risk, but it were buffer overflows, and buffer overflows not directly in the protocol, but caused by the process that checks a client certificate, and there was no bound on the email address field length, so that was causing the buffer overflow. Um, to make it less impacting, it only affected OpenSSL version 3.0 to up to 3.06, so the most recent version of OpenSSL. A lot of open source products are leveraging those latest versions, so version 3 of OpenSSL. However, if you look at vendors who typically need FIPS certification, most of them are still running version 1.x, 11x, 10x, I believe. And those versions were not affected. So a lot of the devices that are in secure environments and that require FIPS certification were still running the older version and were unaffected by this vulnerability. So that eliminated a good number of devices already. Knowing that OpenSSL 3.0 was only certified FIPS in August 23 of this year. So that meant like 2 months before the actual vulnerability was disclosed. So none of the vendors would have had the time to do their QA before putting that FIPS version in their products and have it on a wide scale, having it released in the field. So that meant that the impact is limited to the 3 version, and also to perform an attack on that, you need to craft a certificate that can be validated, because first you have a CA certificate that you need to hack to create a client certificate from, because otherwise your certificate will just be denied on the fact of that is not coming from the CA certificate that your device is validating. So if a hacker can make a fake certificate uh, leveraging your CA private certificate because you lost it in some way, um, and even if you lost it, I think you have much bigger problems than this vulnerability. Even then, it's still hard to find that buffer overflow that can result in a remote command execution. So I would not downplay it. I would say, of course, if you are vulnerable, do the update, but I wouldn't call it such a high risk compared to a Log4j where everybody pretty much was impacted online or offline. A lot more systems were impacted. So yes, so that was like a little bit of drama with a pre-announcement in 1 week is gonna come. So everybody was sitting there waiting, and then it fell, and it's like, okay. So, and then trying to get some risk assessment done and thinking out loud, I think that everybody comes to the same conclusion that it's like, okay, update it, but do not cause any panic around that.
It's really tough to keep people with cool heads in these moments, especially when you're doing pre-release announcements and CVEs.
Yeah,
you assume the sky is falling and everybody prepares for the sky to fall. And then
Yeah,
when you realize it's not the sky falling, I think a lot of people detach from the issue and they don't want to look into it anymore. Like it's either got to be a 10 or a 1,
yeah,
right? But no one cares about anything else between.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's yeah. There was a lot of discussion and anticipation on that, and that went in that week before it was disclosed. So yeah, it led to a lot of discussion and people thinking forward. Yeah, another one, Docker Hub images. Yeah, we talk a lot about supply chain attacks in those components from open source like the Python index, and npm store, so the store for Node.js. But yeah, it also happens in other stores like Docker Hub images. You know, Docker Hub, you can install Docker on your system and then you want to create a new container. And to create that new container, you're going to use a template. And best thing to do is go on Docker Hub, find an image. Okay, that's Ubuntu this version and it already has MySQL and Apache. Okay, that's the image that I want. Okay, I'm going to type in the name of that image, latest version. It automatically creates a container, and then I just need to add a couple of commands in there to customize it in my way. Change the password. Hopefully, you think about that. Change the default password from that image, and then run the container, and you're up and running. So it's very easy. And there's like I I don't know how many, but I would estimate like hundreds of thousands of images there in Docker Hub that you can easily download the application that you actually need. If you want to run a home control system, well, you can download the Docker container with that home control. You want to do some statistics, or you want to have your information in Elasticsearch, big data, MongoDB. There's all images out there that contain everything, the whole elk stack included. Just one command, boom, you install it, run it, and yeah, you're up and running. So very convenient. Hacking images to play some hacking, capture the flag, and so on. But also another opportunity for malicious actors to put crypto miners, backdoors, DNS hijackers in there. Another risk for people accidentally leaking their AWS credentials, because you know that your client ID and your secret ID, they sit in the environment. So if you create an image and you put your client ID and your secret ID in the environment, then you forget to take that out and make that as a parameter for your image, and you just publish it to the hub, well, your keys are in the open. Um, your secure shell key, you connect it and you have your secure shell key automatically updated and added there in your root path. You publish it, you lost your key, it's up there in the public. GitHub environment variables, so keys, npm tokens, several images. Well, 208 is not that much, but still, it's 208 too many images with AWS credentials and SSH keys. You see the breakdown over there. This was something that was done by Sysdig, by the way. So more than 17,000 malicious images that were actually downloaded. And what kind of technique is their favorite technique to lure you into downloading that image? Typo squatting, of course. So it's exactly the same MO and the same TTPs as they use for the PyPis and the npm stores. So the same supply chain attack in open source for development, but this time Docker Hub images. So it's interesting to see that the same techniques just apply throughout the whole system. Internet noise. Yeah, we make a lot of noise on the internet. You and me,
Yeah,
Daniel.
especially me.
But we're not talking about that kind of noise.
Talking about beating my chest and screaming
Yeah.
all over the place.
The gray noise of the internet, as I like to call it, and the name actually comes from um, black and white hats scanning the internet for vulnerabilities and for exploits. So the white hat do it for the good of the internet. Some do it for their business, or some are in the business of scanning. Think about Shodan, Census, Zoomai, very interesting
Wait.
services.
There's also gray noise,
No, no,
business of scanning.
uh,
No,
are
no, there's actually
are
a
they
company called
scanning?
Gray Noise.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
are they scanning, or are they having their honeypots capture?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, my bad.
So that's like a passive way of collecting information. Yeah, because I call it gray noise of the internet. That's probably why you made the association immediately with gray noise. But I believe they do the same thing as we do. They have a global network of honeypots that are capturing all that information, and based on that, they can they can have information like we have here on the scanners, for example. But Showdown, Senses, Zoomai, they have active scanners, and I have a whole list of IP addresses, where they're scanning from, what they're scanning for, which ports. It's not limited to that. We have our own competitors out there that are scanning the internet looking for open DDoS services for amplification, which is for sure. It's always good to have an assessment of the risk. When a new vulnerability comes out, how do you know how dangerous it is? Well, in the case of OpenSSL, we could already assess that the tree version was not that widespread, especially not in secure environments because of that FIPS. But if a new vulnerability like memcached came out, what did we do? Well, we put up some scanner and we scanned the whole internet range and tried to find out how many of those memcached servers are open out there and are vulnerable and can be exploited. And the DVID, the Dutch Internet Vulnerability, I will come back to the last letter, Association, with Victor, they were scanning the whole internet and actually sent messages, emails to people saying, "Hey, you have a vulnerable server. This is the vulnerability. It would be good to close it. Not extort them for money, not doing the bug hunting because some do it for business of bug hunting, that's also things that we see whenever there's a new vulnerability published. You see a whole lot of bug hunters out there that put their name and their one hacker platform association ID in there that they try to find that vulnerability in your system. So there's lots of activity out there that we can catalog as non-productive traffic. It's unsolicited traffic. It's not there to exploit your system, but it's still non-productive traffic, as I would call it. So that's why we refer to it as noise of the internet. And gray comes from white and black hat doing it at the same time. So, but actually, it came to my attention again in Australia, because one of the customers over there was talking to me and saying, "Hey, we were DDoS attacked by an actor called Recyber." Recyber. I heard that name somewhere, but it doesn't ring a bell. And then when I got back in my hotel, I looked up like Recyber. Oh no, Recyber.net is one of those scanners. But then I went to look into Recyber.net because I never really looked into it specifically. I see that they do scanning activity and I see that it's pretty hard, but then when I zoomed in, I saw that actually this year, and especially in the last couple of weeks, well, 1.5 months, they have been scanning very aggressively. And they're scanning globally. So it is still scanning activity because when you look at it across all our sensors that we have deployed globally, the same amount of scans come back in every sensor. But on some occasions, I saw more than 1 billion packets per day, and that is a lot for a couple so a couple 240 sensors, I believe we have deployed. That is a lot per sensor. And actually, I calculated the average bandwidth that they created between October and November. So it was beginning of October, 1st of October and November. I think it was no, 16, yeah, November 16, something like that. So 1 month and a half. And across 1 month and a half, the average bandwidth that they consume was 6 megabit per second in our cloud, which is not, yeah, sometimes peaking at 36 megabit per second. I would not say it's that large. It's not a DDoS attack. But some
Hmm.
days it really looks and smells like a DDoS attack. At some point, they had like in 4 days, they did more than 600,000 HTTP requests. 600,000 HTTP requests in 4 days, that's a lot. That starts to feel
That's
like an attack almost, can be interpreted as an attack. And even if it's not an attack, 6 megabit per second, hey, you're taking away that bandwidth. That's you you are impacting those servers. Those servers CPU cycles are being processed. So on an average rate of 12,000 packets per second, peaking at 70,000 packets per second, those are rates that, well, your infrastructure has to process that. That comes in our cloud from those guys. And then I went to look further because I wanted to know what kind of business is associated with recyber.net. And that's where I hit like, yeah, a blog because the information for recyber.net, the whois information is redacted for privacy. There was only an address, and that address was located in Iceland, Reykjavik, Iceland. Now, Reykjavik, Iceland is one of those countries, besides the Netherlands, as Daniel already mentioned, that are popular for bulletproof service hosting. And then I found another bulletproof service hoster who actually had the same phone number and the same address as recyber.net. So I'm pretty much sure that something is fishy there. I didn't put my finger on it. I never got any answer on the abuse messages. So for me, recyber might be in that gray zone going into the black area more than it is legal.
Well, if they're not responding to you, that's definitely a shady situation. But this kind of brings up the same
Well,
question that we've been
yeah,
asking over and over again: is how many packets is too many packets? Where's that threshold for malicious activity, criminal activity? It's very gray as well, right?
yeah. If you go to recyber.net, you get a form to opt out. But I I prefer to do my due diligence and try to find out who's behind recyber.net before I post my IP addresses on their website to opt out of their service. So many of the legal ones like Showdown, Senses, Zuma, you can send. They have web pages where you can opt out. They even have web pages where you can register honeypots and so on. So you can give them the information, and most of the scanners, even the legal scanners, like even when we scan, how do you recognize a white hat scanner? Typically, that would be by doing a reverse DNS. So when I ask my cloud provider, hey, I want to do internet scanning, I don't want you to block me when I do that because they see strange activity when you start scanning, of course. So they're gonna kick you off the service if it's a good cloud provider because you should not be doing that. However, you can ask them for like a license to scan, and what they requested from me is that my IP addresses that I use for scanning must be reverse DNS resolvable. So you put in the IP address with NSLOOKUP, you find the domain name associated, and when you go to that domain name, you need to identify yourself as a security researcher. You explain, look, I'm this person. Here are the links to valid articles that I put out there and companies that I help with my scanning. This is the activity that I'm doing right now. If you have a problem, contact me here to opt out of the scanning or provide a form to opt out of the scanning. Now, recyber.net does that. If you reverse resolve their IPs, they come out on recyber.net. But when you go to the website, you just have that website without a phone number, without a person. It just says copyright recyber.net, and when you do the whois record, it's even more fishier. So it's a strange kind of situation, and especially seeing the number of packets that come out there. Maybe they have been abused. Could also be, but
It's a strong
it's
possibility as well.
yeah. So and keeping track of all the opt-outs, that is a little bit the problem that we have with gray noise of the internet and why I refer to it as the gray noise of the internet. It's out there. Yes, you can opt out, but hey, I have to contact Shodan and Census and Zoomai, and then I have to go to Netscout because they're also scanning. And then I have to go to another security company because they're also and Shadow server, and there's so many services that are scanning you. You cannot keep track of all those services and go and opt out of each of those services. And then you will have a researcher like us who scan like maybe once or twice a year, where you say, okay, so now I have to go in those guys who scan one or twice a year, which may be 20 or 30 more people where I have to opt out. It's impossible to keep track of all that. Does it impact you? Well, yeah, it does impact you. Is it a big impact? I would not say that, but it is there and it's something to be aware of. Now, it can be easily blocked. So, because we have our honeypots and we see that activity, those IP addresses of scanners typically go in the top of the most active attackers, in our honeypots. So what I found out is that like 70 to 80% is just blocked by a IP feed that we take from our honeypots. So we just take that information from honeypots, top attackers, we feed it in, we block on the IP, and 70 to 80% of that scanning is already eliminated just by that IP feed. So it's fairly easy to eliminate it. So it's not really that big of a problem, but something to be aware of. And talking about scanning, and that was an event that I was at last week. So I was not only in Australia in the last month, I was also in the Netherlands,
A
which
lot of
is
traveling there.
yeah, well, it's just a drive for me, so it's not that far away. But I was invited by friends from the NBIP, and now there's also a new association that they created, which is the Clean Networks platform in the Netherlands. And under the Clean Networks platform is one that we know very well, which is the DIVD, the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure. Um, I already mentioned Victor Gevers just in the previous slide, but he's one of the people who created the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure. And he was one of those ethical researchers that saw vulnerability and then started scanning and cataloged all the servers and tried to find out who's the owner of the server and contact them to let them know, hey, your server is vulnerable. Now, as Daniel said, Netherlands is one of those countries that comes up quite frequently when it comes to bulletproof services and hosting, and also DDoS as a service scanners, Vegasec, who was used by the Russians to attack the day before the invasion of Ukraine to attack Ukraine services, was also
Yep.
hosted in the Netherlands. And the Dutch security community is very aware of that. And they want that to disappear because it has bad branding. So service providers and internet providers, cloud providers, they all came together and created that national management organization, so the NBIP, Nationale Beheersorganisatie in Dutch. And they came together there, and part of it is also a DDoS platform that does DDoS scrubbing, and that they share a lot of information and intelligence. And that new Clean Networks platform also fits in there because what they do is they provide a central platform for abuse. So whatever abuse, if you find phishing email, you can send it to them. They will vet it, they will look at the information, then they will distribute it through their network of partners. And the network of partners means that they have access to uh, businesses, so it might be financial organizations that are in their organization and that work together with them. But you also have service providers, cloud providers. So all the people who are in this organization will get that information vetted, and they even have a portal where you can put your IPs and find out what those IPs from the scanning that Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure that are part of those clean networks. They find out that your IPs have certain vulnerabilities. If they're high vulnerability, they will send a notification. Otherwise, they will list it in a portal. So I think that this is an example of scanning for non-profit. That's scanning for the good of the community. They are non-profit organizations. They're not making money of that scanning, so they're not selling any services. They are trying to build a bridge between industry and government and coming together and try to work hard to join their forces and make the internet a safer place. And as I said to them, that is actually the best way to go about it because, in my opinion, we will never get rid of the bad guys, but we can take away their opportunities. If we can take away their opportunities, we will be in a much safer world with much less bad guys focusing on our country and getting abuse of us. So kudos to the people over there and to the Netherlands for having this platform. And I hope that other countries, maybe I'm not aware of other instances out there in other countries, but I think that this is a nice example of how countries should come together and protect their citizens, how governments should work with the industry and bring everybody around the table and make sure that your country is much more secure. And especially looking forward, as everybody's getting nervous in the wake of the invasion by Russia and Ukraine, you see that there's this like cyber cold war going on where everybody is ramping up their offensive capabilities. I would say having a vulnerability-free country will make sure that they have much less opportunity to get information in your country, because home devices are the number one for botnets. Botnets are used for misinformation, for DDoS attacks. If you want to do a DDoS attack against Domino's Pizza in Russia, for example, I gave that example a couple of recordings or sessions ago. If I would like to attack Domino's Pizzas in Russia, well, I could build a big botnet outside of Russia and attack them, and ask everybody attack this target. What Russia will do is just geo-block it. Say
Yep.
every IP address that comes from outside of Russia has no business on Domino's Pizza, because I only deliver to Russian citizens in the Russian country. So I just geo-block it. Same what every government will do, because their citizens are supposed to be in the country. So they come from inside the country. However, if your country is so vulnerable that you have many IoT that are vulnerable devices and they've been infected by a botnet, I just go to a DDoS as a service website and I can click which region my attack needs to originate from. And in the case of Domino's Pizza, I will say, okay, originate from all the countries that are still partners with Russia and that Russia will not geoblock. Click, 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 start the attack, and the attack will originate from infected IoT devices in those countries and will bring down the website. So you're vulnerable again against DDoS attacks, just because you did not take care of that vulnerability problem in IoT devices. So it is important to not let that linger, because it can be abused against you at some point. And that's what I
For
like
sure.
about the Dutch people. So kudos for the Dutch people. And
Victor and DIVD is like, I'm a huge fan of them. So throw them a follow on Mastodon,
yeah,
Twitter, all social media platforms. They post great content.
yeah,
Definitely help you keep you a front in front of the threats.
yeah. Good stuff. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me as a presenter in your event. It was a big honor to speak in front of all those smart people there.
So getting back into credential access here, I know we've covered credential access a few times on the last TRLs, but specifically we have a couple of new things that we want to throw in here. So I think we're all familiar with general credential access, the MITRE framework. I forget the exact number for it, but anyways, it applies to basically how cybercriminals get access to your credentials. And one of those ways is they do it through information stealers. So information stealers are very popular right now. We've seen them used in the Uber hack. We've seen them used across the FIFA World Cup. We haven't really seen them used too much in the Russian-Ukrainian war, but these are very, very popular services. So specifically here we have Raccoon Stealer. So this is slash was a very popular information stealer. Now we'll cover why it was a little bit later, but this was one of the most notorious information stealers out there in the market. It was very easy to get a hold of. You simply went onto the XSS forum and you could find the user. It cost what was $150 for 7 days, $275 for a month, $50 for additional build outs with unique tags, specifically things that you're looking for on people's systems. But I wanted to kind of draw a note here as far as Raccoon Stealer. Raccoon Stealer had some issues right around when the war started. They claimed they lost one of their main programmers, one of their core developers to the war that had allegedly died. They went dark and then they came back with Raccoon Stealer 2.0. And I'll say the better part for last, but they come, they gone, they come, they gone. They're gone. But um, all
Balaga.
that information all that information that's actually harvested from Raccoon Stealer or Redline or any of these other very popular information stealers out there end up on markets like Russian market, right? So we've covered this before. It's a very simple marketplace. It's a pay to play, so you actually have to buy access to become a member there. But once you get in there, you can purchase what they call logs for $10, right? And you can specify the logs by different types of stealers, regions, or you can specifically dive down into a target with their domain. Now, once you buy a log, you're going to find that there's a lot of information in there. Specifically, you're going to see the user's URL, username, and passwords that they're going to for every website. You're going to get a list of their system information and programs that are installed on their actual computer. You're also going to get autofill information from the browsers, cookies from the browsers, domains detected, installed software, like I said, password processing list. It's pretty detailed for $10 for each victim. And this is kind of how the kid from Lapsus targeted Uber is a threat actor went onto Russian marketplace. They bought one simple credential, and then they launched an MFA exhaustion attack against the contractor, the third party contractor. Were able to get access, and they got access to the VPN, and everything was over from there. But this is an example that comes into the logs. If you want to find out more about these information stealers and actually the impacts that they have downrange as far as like ransomware attacks, I highly advise you all to check out this new webinar that we just did with Cyber Six Skill. Cyber Six Skill is an amazing intelligence platform, but specifically Dove Learner, their security researcher from Six Skill, dives into the most popular information stealers. He covers the difference in between IABs, initial access brokers, and WAMs, wholesale access markets. So for example, Russian market is a wholesale access marketplace. And then they go even further into looking at the connections between WAMs and ransomware attacks. So they've actually been able to find correlations between ransomware attacks and the credentials that were sold prior to those ransomware attacks on these wholesale access markets. So very cool. Definitely a webinar worth seeing. I think it's like only about 45 minutes, but it will
No,
definitely
it's
show you kind of an
25 minutes.
insight.
25.
25 minutes.
Yeah, but it's
25 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm
very
adding time
interesting.
there.
Yeah. No, but yeah, to give yourself a little bit more credit, Daniel, because yeah, I know that you did most of the research for this, and typically you don't take the credit for it enough, but the importance of this work is really, really, really timely. And think about this scenario. What happened in 2020 and 2021? Corona happened, right? People had to work
Right.
from home. Some people got a laptop back home. Some people didn't get any device back home, but organizations started to put out cloud services. So and people could use their own PC to connect to the cloud. So when you connect your PC to the cloud, what you do, you log in that cloud. You can save your credentials. Okay, when you save your credentials, you have an info stealer. Well, he logs the URL and the credentials that were saved. You might say, okay, I don't save my credentials. All is fine and dandy, and I have multi-factor authentication, so you cannot hack me. Well, I wrote an article actually a year ago on pass the cookie. Um, One of the techniques and what happens when you log in to your cloud environment, you receive a token that is kept on your browser so that the next time you click on something, you don't have to authenticate yourself. Otherwise, on each click on each connection, you would have to re-authenticate yourself. So what happens is once you authenticate, you get a session ID or a token, and that token is used to identify you as you go through the website. Now, some of those tokens never change. It's a bad implementation. I know they should change every couple seconds to make it more secure, but some of them might be persistent. And some of those tokens are valid for a longer time because when I go offline and I come back tomorrow in the morning and I go to my office.com, I get access without authenticating. Now, where does that information come from? Comes from your cookie. And that cookie is also stolen by those info stealers. So even if you have multi-factor authentication and you don't save your password, having that cookie exposed there and having somebody who gets access to it timely can leverage that cookie to break into your session and then move lateral from there. And that's why those initial access brokers have been so successful in the last several months or years. Those initial access brokers have broken into several organizations, then dropped crypto lockers, and yeah, the rest is history. You're under ransomware attack, and that's how it happened. So that was fueled by the work from home and also having people put more applications in the cloud and not taking the time to secure them always. This is one of those important things, and now we see the results of that, which is those credential access, those wholesale access markets in the underground that are selling just for $10 whole records with information with the name of the company. So you know if you target a specific company, you go to that wholesale access market, type in the name, you see all the records, and then you buy them for a couple of bucks. Then you start to test them. That's what initial access brokers do. And sometimes they don't even target an organization. They just buy a bunch of them, and they start testing widely. And if they hit one, okay, yay, happy. Like police here, the local police in Zweinaarde, they were
Oh yeah.
Ragnar Locker got in there. They got lots of sensitive information stolen. They were in time to take out the server before the encryption process happened, but they were already a couple of days in there because they were able to exfiltrate information. So you have to know that ransomware operators, they're not just about encrypting your information. They come into your network. The first thing they do is try to take as much information from the network as possible. Gather sensitive information. What happened with Medibank? What happened with this police in Zwijndrecht? Is there that's sensitive information that they stole. So first they exfiltrate that information. After exfiltrating, they encrypt. Why do they exfiltrate? Well, it's easy. When they do only encryption, some people figured out that a good backup can restore a network faster than a decryption key. So why would I pay the guys if I have a good backup? So I invest in a good backup system. I'm all covered. And that's why they invented the second level of extortion, which is, well, if you don't want to pay for the encryption key, maybe you will pay for me not leaking and making public the most sensitive information that I've stolen from you. So that's the second. And then you have the third extortion, and that's how we come to the triple extortion. If you don't want to pay and you don't care about the information that was exfiltrated, they will do DDoS attacks to bring you back to the negotiation table. As Daniel said, if you have offsite backups that you pull in through the internet, well, if you're under DDoS attack, you're not going to restore a lot, are you? And also, it puts pressure, it makes it more public. That's also the reason why those ransomware operators created those underground websites, what they call journalists' websites. So they have their onion websites, and whenever there's a leak, they post it on that website, and journalists are scamming, are just scanning all the websites. And whenever there's a new post, well, they bring it to an article, say, hey, it looks like this company has been attacked. And that company that wanted to keep it under covers and handle that incident in their way now suddenly is exposed in the media, gets journalists asking questions, the government coming on top of that, authorities coming in. Everybody's is looking at you, so that puts a big amount of pressure on that organization. So everything that they do in ransomware, it's all for a reason. And it all starts and circulates around that access, credential access. So that's the importance. So I would advise you to look at this webinar. It's this really good webinar. Uh, Dov did the correlation in his research between those initial access brokers and the WAMs that they leverage and actual big ransomware attacks. And it seems that a lot of those leaked credentials actually resulted in a successful ransomware extortion. So very
Yeah,
important.
credential access is a really big problem, as you said, like
Hmm.
because of the COVID and everything. And the worst part about it is that, the blood's in the water now. Everybody knows that information stealers are the way to go, and they're becoming quite the popular tool out there.
Oh yeah, they are. Which brings us to a recent one
The
from
wasp, yeah.
yeah from Checkmarks. So WASP is a Python-based information stealer. It's what we call polymorphic malware, which means that on every install it changes a little bit, so it cannot be caught. It's difficult to catch with an antivirus that looks on signatures, and that's the whole idea. To infect systems that are running Python. They have boot persistence, so they make themselves persistent. So after you reboot, it's still there, and it's an information stealer. It hides some of its code in steganography, so that means in images. So you have images where, so you just see a bunch of images in that directory, but when you do the right algorithm on that image, that's gonna result in code. And that code is in real time in memory. So it never sits on your disk as real code. So the antivirus will not detect it, but in memory it can be decoded and loaded as a module. Um, so what Wasp Dealer does is it started out with Discord accounts, but then it also went after whatever password possible from your web browsers, crypto wallets, credit cards, whatever is interesting as information. And typically being used as a supply chain attack on PyPy by using typo squatting, of course. So they put some modules out there with a name that looks like or uses in capital I instead of a small l, things like that. And the exfiltration of the information. So all the information that it WASP can gather, it sends to a hard-coded Discord webhook address, and the author of WASP is selling it for $20, so it's fairly cheap. Now the interesting part comes that somebody,
This is the worst, dude. Like,
yeah,
absolutely the worst.
so somebody found a good idea to lure users into installing that malicious package for WASP. So imagine this. On TikTok, there's a new challenge that is trending that's called Invisible Challenge. And that all goes around a filter that is called invisible body. When you put that filter, only the profile of your body is visible. So what's inside the body is not colored in. That's what the filter does. So there's now a new challenge where people are posing naked and making naked videos using that invisible body. So you see that profile of the body, and you can see one of the screenshots here. You see that profile of a girl with long blonde hair, but you don't see it filled in. And supposedly she's sitting there naked. Now, what do people who are looking at that video want the most? To find out that there's a
Unfiltered.
slip in the filter, right? Or find a unfilter. So one one of those guys had the great idea to create a unfilter for invisible body. So he was posting links on TikTok videos and comments and so on with a fake software called Unfilter. And that fake software Unfilter has a tutorial, has a whole install procedure, and it explains you how to use Python and how to use certain modules to install using PyPy. And one of those modules contain WASP. Yeah, smart boy.
Very smart.
Yeah. So whenever there's
That,
something popular, the scams are reaching the limit.
but that's something that we see with the information stealers. Like we had covered it in the past that they use YouTube videos,
Cheat.
specifically like looking at the
Yeah.
FIFA World Cup, where
Yeah.
criminals are using backdoor to crack versions of FIFA soccer games to put information stealers in. It's unbelievable what people will use for lure for information stealers, and this is just showing how far they're willing to go.
Yeah. So if
Uh,
you do invisible body videos, you're part of the problem.
I would agree
Daniel,
there.
we will stay here with the normal filters. I
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an invisible body for OBS, and if there was, we wouldn't be using it, or certainly not sit naked here and use it.
Oh, that's how we lose our
NSW,
job
yeah,
very
not
quickly.
suitable for work.
I don't know how YouTube would feel about it, but that would be actually kind of funny. Okay, so into our last section here, raids and arrests. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
sections. We love covering this. So if I can get access again, there we go. How not to properly lizard. I'll tell you, Pascal, I never thought I was going to cover this kid. I really didn't. I've looked up to him. I
I
mean,
I've
Ezekiel
heard
is
you
in it
talk about him in many different occasions. Yeah.
for like 10 years now, dude.
Yeah.
It's just this kid is absolutely on fire. He was affiliated with Lizard Squad and HTTP. One of the most gangsterous hackers I've ever met. This kid knew what he was doing. He was very talented. I'll just say he was talented with what he did. I wrote about him several times and Lizard Squad about how um, had access to money versus other hacking groups that didn't have access to money. He was able to do much more because of that wealth that he had from his family. And ultimately, he was caught. He was 17 years old when he was caught in Finland for 50,700 aggravated cyber crimes. And this ranges from DDoS attacks, data breaches, interference in telecommunications, fraud, violation. Unbelievable. And the Finnish government gave him 2 years suspended sentence. And I think we all kind of thought that was crazy. Brian Krebs has written about this kid many, many times. Julius was specifically the guy that was behind all the DDoS attacks during Christmas, knocking out PlayStation and Xbox. Just a very funny, lolsy hacker from back in the day. And you kind of wonder what happens to these type of people as time goes on, right? Either burn out or burn in, join. There's all kinds of different directions you go in. I can say like many members from LulzSec are now actually legitimate members in the IT community. So the question is like, what happens to this 17-year-old kid? Well, he continued cybercrime, and now he's actually on the run. He's one of Europe's most wanted fugitives, which was absolutely insane for a few of us to see this report go up because, as I said, it was something that you never really kind of expected. Ezekiel's photo to be there on Europe's most wanted board. But there he is. He's on the run right now for racketeering and extortion charges. He launched a ransomware campaign against a psychotherapist center. And when that center decided not to pay the ransom, just like we've seen several other organizations, he started extorting the patients directly for 500 euros, 22,000 patients. And because of that, there's serious charges that have come down on him, and now he is actually on the run. Now, Pascal and I were talking about this. Where would someone in Finland go on the run to?
Russia.
Russia,
Yeah.
exactly.
St. Petersburg is the
Oh,
closest city. Looking from Finland, well, it's just across the border.
so it's sad to see this.
You
I,
might
I
find them in
hope that
Ukraine right now.
yeah, he could be all kinds of places. Like what was his name? Andrew Warmheimer Weave was allegedly somewhere around there in the Russian Moldova area. So
Mhm.
um, definitely have to run to the danger zone to avoid
Iceland?
prosecution, but
If he's a good swimmer,
may
he might swim to Iceland. It's
might be
cold.
lucky
It's
over
cold,
there.
but
I personally hope for a safe return of this kid. He's definitely going to go to jail for a long time, but it's unfortunate to see someone like this on the run and actively being pursued by law enforcement around the world. It's going to be weird to see how the story ends, but I think he's definitely approaching the end of his criminal career here.
yeah.
So that's how not to properly lizard. And
Ah,
how
raccoon.
not to raccoon. So this is something I was talking about specifically. We're extracting, extraditing raccoons now as well. So this gentleman was the core developer of the Raccoon Stealer that we had mentioned earlier in several slides. He's currently awaiting extradition to the United States. He's a 26-year-old that fled Ukraine at the beginning of the war, and
Yeah.
he was arrested on March
When
20th
when
in the
people were
Netherlands.
not allowed to go out of the country because they were needed to serve their country in the military. So he bribed somebody and drove off with his girlfriend to better country.
He
And
drove off in his very nice sports car and was captured on international camera crossing the
yeah,
border at high rates of speed.
exactly.
And then when he finally got to Amsterdam, his girlfriend decided it would
Yeah,
be a great time to start taking Instagram
yeah.
photos, and it all
She,
fell
yeah.
apart for him.
The
Now, so
police
the reference I
found
made
her
earlier with
by Instagram. Yeah, that's so different.
how many criminal hackers and
Yeah.
even rappers that get shot and killed over their girlfriends taking photos of them in places they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of risk is that these people are high risk criminals that choose to leave their region of safety uh, in order to seek freedom. And I get why this kid might be a deserter from Ukraine. I'm not justifying it, but most people don't want to fight in wars. Let's
Mhm.
just say that. And he fled. And of course, he got arrested for fleeing mandatory military services in Ukraine, which now I have to ask the question, would you rather go to jail in Ukraine for fleeing mandatory services, or would you rather be flown to the United States to go to
Well,
jail for your
that
cyber crimes?
that's not a choice that he will be able to make. That's up to the judge in the
It's
Netherlands.
a
That's
choice
gonna
he
be.
could have made
Oh
before
yeah,
fleeing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But he probably is not a fighter, and he probably didn't want to risk dying in the war, which is, I'm going to say fair. I'm not going to say right, but I'm going to say fair.
Mhm.
But the reason why I want to bring this up is because we had previously talked about how a Raccoon Stealer developer had died in the war.
Yeah,
And they posted about this when they came back. Well, it turns out the
he
developer
didn't
didn't
die.
die. He was arrested.
He ran away
The
from the war and then was arrested because his girlfriend was showing off in
Yeah, so
Amsterdam.
I thought this was kind of interesting about how the story kind of comes to a close here with the raid and arrest. That he fled military services. His girlfriend doxed him via Instagram, and then we all kind of find out about his arrest day and the post that happened on XSS as far as their back and the statement that someone died. In reality, it was Mark getting arrested, which sad situation for him, good situation for law enforcement community. But we're going to find out how this trial goes when he gets to the United States and
Way to go,
likely if
Dutch
he finishes
police.
this. Yeah, but once he finishes his service here in the United States, as far as like his time in jail, he will be returned to his country. And this is the
Mhm.
same issue that we talked about with Daniel K. Daniel K got out of jail last month and he found himself right back into custody, being extradited once against the United States.
Yeah.
There's a very common thing about this is once you get arrested, you become the hot potato and you get
Yeah.
passed around to all these different countries to serve your crime. And he'll probably serve some
Again.
kind of
Yeah.
criminal service inside Ukraine for not only fleeing mandatory military service, but also running the Raccoon campaign.
Yeah.
It's not the rest of this guy's life is doomed. I hope he enjoyed his sports car and all of his money, because I don't see that in his future. This is the reason why to go legit, everybody.
Yeah,
You get to keep your sports cars.
yeah. If you
So
work
this is
long and
another
hard
interesting.
enough, yeah.
I swear, there's a running campaign of cyber criminals that were pretty much pro-Russian online that were in Ukraine that have been getting arrested like crazy, right? So you not only have the raccoon stealer, the guy that fled, but you here have Tank, an admin from Jabber Zeus. He was arrested. So I'm not too sure if y'all are familiar, but Jabber Zeus is a information stealing crime organization. So like they run information stealers. They use a custom variant of Zeus Banking Trojan. So allegedly, Tank got Zeus Banking Trojan from their authors, and it was redeveloped specifically for Jabber Zeus, which basically is an information stealer that once information is harvested, is reported back to them via Jabber, just to kind of close that circle there. But anyways, he was a 40-year-old, so a little older than most cyber criminals, in my opinion, that are arrested. But a 40-year-old was arrested in Switzerland while on the run on October 23rd. This guy was actually a very famous DJ in Ukraine. I'd say his DJ career was more famous than his hacking career. He was also very tied into corruption as far as the police and government in Ukraine go. He was able to pay off many authorities to prevent himself from getting arrested. There's even jokes about you knew where him and his gang were because of all the BMWs that were parked in parking lots, just dripping and oozing with money. And living a very fun Playboy lifestyle, being a DJ, traveling around playing nightclubs. Specifically, his cyber gang was targeting small, medium-sized businesses with these information and banking trojans. So they're stealing money from these people once they got their credentials. But this is interesting. He doxed himself.
It's not his
His
girlfriend, it
Jabber.
was himself this time.
Yeah, once again, so the authorities had compromised their Jabber communication, and they're sitting on their Jabber channels watching these conversations happen. And his daughter was born, and he jumped on the Jabber and immediately started telling people his daughter was born here, and this was the weight. And the Ukrainian authorities simply just went and started looking to see, was there a girl that was born here on this date, and they found her,
With
and they
this
tied
weight,
her back
yeah.
to Zoo or to Tank here. And because of that, his whole entire organization fell down. He was arrested in Switzerland, and things are not going too well for him at the moment. I bet you he wishes he was back in the club playing his CD DJs there
Uh,
versus sitting in a jail cell. But unfortunate side for that. Once again, girlfriends and lives doxing themselves. And this is kind of funny because I'd heard it once from someone in the community. I won't name who they were, but it was a presentation they gave on stage. So I don't think it's that private. But he was talking about generally how he didn't have a social media presence and he wanted to be offline. But he ended up being doxxed by cyber criminals because his wife was a foodie and she'd always take pictures of the food that she was eating. And you could always see a figure on the other side of the table in all these photos. He wasn't in the figure, but you could see a little bit of an outline. And that's how criminals were able actually to trace him and find out exactly where he was and what he was doing was not through him, was through his wife. This is something that also happened with the whole Lulsex situation with Sabu and his girlfriend as well. So you kind of have to be careful when you're a cyber criminal operating at such a high level, because everything from your car to your personal life can definitely ruin it all. Especially if you want to be a public figure while being a hacker, like this guy being a
um,
DJ,
yeah.
you're really kind of asking for the spotlight to be put on you.
Unless you're in Russia.
Yeah, unless you're in Russia. Exactly. And then to close this out once again, I mean, this month on month on month here, the Ukrainian SBU has raided another bot farm. So we've covered this many times. These bots are being used to disseminate pro-Russian propaganda, but they're inside Ukraine doing it, which is a huge risk. 5 people were arrested in this raid. It was a pro-Russian bot farm that was in Kiev and Vinistia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Anyways, the operators were able to create 500 social media accounts per day with the system that you can see in this picture here. And as Pascal says, like, it's kind of crazy, right, to think that someone has all these SIM cards on one cell phone tower. I
Yeah,
mean, like they could get away with hiding inside of a mall before
yeah.
the war, but if the mall's bombed out and they're just sitting there with all these SIM cards on one tower, they're definitely sitting ducks. But the operators are being paid by the Russian Federation, and they're using these accounts to spread Kremlin propaganda. So it's the same thing over and over again. But it's kind of amazing, in my opinion, how many bot farms there's been in
It's
Ukraine
ev
and how
ev
many have been arrested.
every month you're coming up with like one or two of these big bot farms full of those phones in Ukraine. that they're taken down, that were actually selling accounts and information to the Kremlin bot factory. Sorry, troll factory.
It's
It's
pretty amazing,
incredible.
isn't it? It's
Wow.
the skill of the SVU to raid all these people, and then the incompetence of pro-Russians inside Ukraine to run these are just unbelievable. But I love seeing the pictures. Like,
Yeah.
before all this happened, I really was not too sure what a bot farm looked like. I had an idea of how it ran,
Well,
but here
click
we go. I
farms we
mean,
already knew from China. You had those click farms with
right.
all those phones where they just go clicking, or you have phones doing like this because they need some to do steps and stuff like that. So they had those solutions in China, but bot farms like this, yeah, this is fairly new to me as well. And we've seen a good batch of them from the Ukraine war. These
The
must have been
Ukrainians.
there already a long time. This is not something that they set up yesterday, right? This
I
operation
hope the
must have been
Ukrainians are
running from
reusing all this
before.
infrastructure, right?
Oh,
I mean, with five bot farms rated back to back to back to back to
yeah,
back,
yeah,
uh, they could really
yeah.
reuse and redeploy these things in a very effective way.
Yeah. They 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 should have used it and not tell anyone that they raided them. Just send misinformation through their bot contact. Just
You
misinform
never
the
know.
misinformers. Maybe the truth will come out. Minus
It
is
wouldn't be the
plus, right?
I was gonna say it wouldn't be the first time that law enforcement has raided someone and arrested them and said, "Keep going,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
you're in jail now."
yeah. You're gonna listen to us. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
with that, I think
What
we're
an
coming
end.
to an
Yeah.
end of our
Yeah.
2 hours and 20 minutes. Whoa.
Yeah.
That was a long one, but hey,
It,
gratefully, we're going to be splitting these up into chapters and reposting them. So if there's a specific section you
hopefully.
want to see, you're not going to have to troll through these long videos anymore. So cheers.
Yeah, thanks for watching. I had fun for sure.
Yeah,
Hope
definitely.
you also did. So, without further ado, we're not gonna see you before the end of the year, so I wish you a good
Oh, yeah,
year
yeah, yeah.
end
So it's in, yeah. Happy
without
holidays.
any incidents or big vulnerabilities dropping in the last 2 weeks of the year. And if all goes well, we see you in the beginning of the year. Hopefully, with a
Yep.
much better year. We're gonna start the year with a blank slate, full of energy, like we started this year, and we hope that it will be incident free till the end of that year. But anyway, thank you very much,
Exactly.
and we see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.